No, we're good. I've got the volume down on my other computer, so
Good, good.
we're good to go.
Awesome. So it looks like we are live. Thank you so much to anyone who is here. I really appreciate you being here, joining me today. I have a very special guest. We have Tracy Lebenzon of the famous Lebenzon Brushes, the genius behind these, which I absolutely love. So I'm very excited to have you here, Tracy. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Liron, how about yourself?
I'm doing excellent. And I want to say to everyone here, just let me know that you can hear us well, that there aren't any issues. Well, we're kind of going to monitor the comments, make sure that you can hear both of us well. I think we should be good. And one more thing, if you have any questions for Tracy, and I think you should have, so just start writing them in the chat if you want to. And after we go through some of the things we have planned, we can open it up for your questions. Okay, so we're ready to go. Are you ready, Tracy?
I am very ready. I'm looking forward to this. It's
Good.
just an honor
So I
to
have
get
to
to spend
say,
some time with you.
yeah, I'm really excited to have you on board. And I have to say to everyone who's here and to you again, I've been really impressed with our correspondence so far and your professionalism and just the communication. It's been really fun. And I feel like I've known you for a long time. And I actually checked, and about a year ago was when we first started corresponding. So time does fly. And I actually want to learn more about how you got to doing what you're doing, how you got into making brushes. So if you want to tell us a bit about that, I'd be really curious.
Sure. Well, first, I'm shocked that it's been a year. It's just like the span of the pandemic has been just like this blur of activity, and it's like a never-ending game of keep up for me, which I'm very happy about, given the alternatives for arts during the pandemic. And well, real brief history of the brushes, and I'll try not to go on because running off at the mouth is what I trained to do for a long, long time, and
That's
I'll try and keep it.
No worries.
That's what I'm here for. So the company, the Lebenzon paintbrushes, or Lebenzon Brushes as it was known, was actually started by my cousin Keith. Keith is or was 10 years older than me, and I moved from Seattle, where I spent most of my youth, back to Portland, where I was actually born, and I went back there to go to college. And Keith was already done with college, and he was an art teacher at the time. And he got the brilliant idea. He took a piece of bamboo and he put something that looked like a paintbrush, though not one of my goat synthetics, on it. And he likes to tell this story about the first time he figured out how to put together paintbrushes from relatively simple tools. And he didn't know it at the time, but it was completely transformative for his life. He was a really well-known potter, did shows. Arts is another big story, but he did shows in the Portland area, in Northern California, and in Washington, the normal travel circuit that you get when you have to haul around tons of equipment, which potters do. It's just what they have to deal with. And he and I were friends, and he had this idea to make brushes. Where he got it from is another story unto itself. I won't go into that at this point. But it literally changed his life, and he started to acquire different types of bamboo and figuring out how to make the brushes work. He was a real traditionalist and stuck with just the classic materials, the Kolinskis. He made some innovative brushes. He had a combination of rabbit and goat that he did. Rabbit's really soft and great for holding liquid, and goat, as you know, is one of my most popular brushes as well, and one of the most popular the world over. And anyway, so he put together several of them, and they always evolve over time because you experiment and you try to improve it. And there's so much nuance to dealing with hair. It's like a lifetime study by itself, a really weird cross-section of knowing something about animal habitat as well as the performance that you need for painting. And it's what artists have done since the beginning of time, and so he did a great job with it. He was at most of the major art shows and artist conferences over a 20-year span. That's like a career in the arts plus some. And he kept getting more and more interested in the work that he done. And even at the dawn of the internet, which is about the time he ended his work, he had a worldwide audience. So we were good friends. We hung out together and told a lot of lies back and forth, as cousins often do. And I got a real interest in what he did. It was always a romantic thing for me because it seems like a better life, right? You don't have to really work for a living. You just enjoy art. And of course, as we all find out, it's just a different type of work. It's 100% self-motivated. And if it doesn't get done, there's no one else to point a finger at. It's all on you. And but I ran a business for 30 years, so I know about being self-motivated. Well, anyway, he did that for a long time. Very, very, very sadly, he passed away rather suddenly, and the business pretty much came to an end when he did. I was actually one of the pallbearers at his funeral. It's something you don't hear every day. And but again, we were good friends, and I kind of decided to take a leap of faith into the world of arts. At that time, I was an IT guy. I own a company that takes care of computer networks and computers for businesses, and I've done that for a long time. I won't go into that. Anyway,
How long would it say? Or it was good?
Sorry, say that again.
You were going to say it was for
Say
too
that
long
again.
a time, or was it okay?
Well, you could argue it was for too long a time. I actually really love the work. I love complex problems, which made me a natural for working with paintbrushes because they're a very complex problem when you get into it. But anyway, I still do that from time to time. I have a few customers going back for a very long time that like my help from time to time, and it's just essentially family with some folks at this point. Anyway, it was kind of a leap of faith, and I started to pursue the arts. And at the time, I was doing what's called digital stitched photography under the name of Justin Elk Artwork. Initially, I was going to specialize in doing what amounts to lounging elk in the forest. There's a lot of that by my studio, and I just fell in love with these creatures and, of course, wildlife in general. And then I branched out from there. This is another story I could spend all day on, and I'll go away from as quickly as I can. But after doing that for probably 8 years, I got a inguinal hernia from my career, my second career at the time of doing art shows. And art shows, there's a lot of work involved that nobody ever sees. Most people at art shows expect that the artists just show up and spread their wares out, which we do, but you actually have to build everything from the ground up, and nobody actually knows that. And so I did that for quite some time, and unfortunately, there's a lot of lifting. I used a 10 foot by 20 foot display, and you have to build the display, and then there's this wall kit called Pro Panels that you have to build, and then you have to hang the artwork. Well, my artwork was up to 8 feet on the long side, and it literally took me 8 hours to build the whole thing. And the bad news is it took me 8 hours to take it down, which is not fun at the end of a show after being on your feet for 12 hours a day.
And when there's multiple days, and you have to do it for a few days.
And sometimes it's on a roadway, and they're in a hurry to open the roadway. And I've had instances where I was still tearing my canopy apart, and traffic was going right past me. Really, really dangerous stuff. So I got a hernia, inguinal hernia, and that put an end to that career. The doctor said, "No more heavy lifting for you. Next time we have to fix this, it's not so easy." So I happened to be uniquely qualified to know about paintbrushes at the time, and I decided to buy some of the materials and start to teach myself how to make paintbrushes. You'd think it'd be a pretty easy thing because it's just hair and a stick when you get right down to it, but there's a lot of nuance. And here I am like 8 years later, still trying to figure out how to do it better and better. So it never really ends. And because of the background with Keith, I knew something about the business side, but I taught myself the totality of making brushes, and I'm still doing that.
Wondered
you learn something
if you inherited any of the knowledge of Keith.
No, I just had pictures of him. I knew some of the tools that he used, but I actually ended up recreating my own tools. There is no hair superstore that you can go to get parts and materials that you need. And there's bits and pieces you can get. But one of the tricks to building a business, I'm a manufacturer when you get right down to it. It's all hand done. But I had to make every single piece that I use, and it's really hard. So you run home to mama, so to speak, and you use all the standard parts you can, and then you have to make just the minorest of changes so that they'll fit your purposes. And it's like a never-ending task. So, and I could go on and on about that. Every one of these steps that I do have come to me as a result of making hundreds of brushes, and you go, okay, this works, but maybe if I do it this way, it can save me a few seconds or a lot of seconds, or it produces a nicer result. One of the things of bamboo, I'm going to grab one of my brushes here. So bamboo, as you know, is just grass. It's a very stiff and reedy type of grass, but the ends of it are very sensitive. And I put in a lot of fit and finish on my brushes so that they feel good in the hand. It's one of the important things that makes working with a brush enjoyable. And hard edges and a lot of little things that are built in, if they're simply not there, it allows the artist to concentrate on working with the artwork. Well, anyway, what I was going to say is one of the things about bamboo is that all the edges, you have to sand them just in one direction, because if you come the other direction, it'll splinter. And once it starts, it never stops. It's one of the fragile things. But bamboo has this really cool natural finish on it. It's a lot like the material in a fingernail. And so it's ultra durable. And but you just have to learn how to treat it. And that's the reason it takes me 50 steps to be able to take a piece of bamboo and the raw materials and put them together in a finished brush. It's actually a little bit over that. I don't like to count too closely. I'm not a big fan of micromanaging. It's built into everything you do if you're good at it, but you
how
just
long
kind
did
of
you
let
say?
it.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. The number of steps is about 50
Oh,
to
50
be able to create
steps.
each
Okay.
brush, right? And so one step is example for me is getting the bamboo from the grove. I actually put out ads in Craigslist and offer to clean
I
out people's
remember that.
groves. And
You told me.
yeah, it's the best way to do it because there's no real supplies for bamboo. Well, there are supplies for bamboo, but you
Do
have
they
to buy
pay
like
for it?
no, I actually do it for free. I offer to
Okay, could
just
be
take the
double the
bamboo in
profit.
exchange for doing the work, right? And I just like rent a U-Haul trailer, and typically the person that I agree to do the work for ends up with just a beautiful garden, and I end up with amounts to a very sore back and a trailer full of bamboo, and then the bamboo sits for a year or more to be able to get you have to dry bamboo very meticulously before you even use it because bamboo solves every problem by doing one thing, and that's to fracture or crack one way or another. So the area where my studio is really high humidity year round. It's like 60 to 70% minimum, and it goes up from there during the winter months. So I keep it in my garage, and the garage itself is largely underground, so it's very cold in there, and so the bamboo dries slowly and very uniformly, which is perfect for bamboo, and it allows it to be really stable without having to do extra steps. Like some people actually put a torch to bamboo to cure it, and it affects the color of it. There's also a wax that grows on bamboo, and if you take it too far, you lose that, and like I said, anything you do wrong to bamboo becomes problematic. So you learn that over time, though, just through repetition. And I could tell you stories about some of the failures I've had. I've never been one to test on a small scale. And so if I need to learn how to do something, I'll make a batch of like 50 or 100 brushes and sure, hope the new technique that I use actually works to my benefit and I don't end up throwing away a bunch of stuff, which I've done more than once.
You know what's crazy?
But it's always good to test on scale. Go ahead.
You have a lot of fans in the chat, so I'm really happy to see this. A lot of people are saying that that they've had great time dealing with you and purchasing the brushes. I'm just putting a few select ones on. I wasn't planning on involving the chat that soon, but I do see that a lot of people have been really enjoying them. And it's funny because we get the brushes and we just start using them and we take it for granted the entire process, which is a lot of trial and error. And as artists, we're familiar with that because we do that for painting. But I have to say, I gained a new kind of appreciation now, just hearing you talk about the process.
Yeah, well, backing up a little bit, brush is one part physics problem and one part psychological problem. The person has to be comfortable, and it's a tool of learning, but it's like the most underappreciated. Let me do that again. Most underappreciated tool of learning there is, because most people see it as a conveyance between getting the paint from A to B, but then people say a brush can't make you or break you, and I will agree to that to degrees. You can make your life a lot easier by getting a brush that does what a brush is supposed to be. And in addition to that, if it's comfortable and you don't start getting problems in your hand and cramps and sore arms and calluses, and a lot of that's built into working with anything, but these are all designed literally to minimize that. That's part of the way I make them. And then they're also designed to be as easy as possible to get material from the paint to the brush, from the brush to whatever the painting media may be. That's the reason that I offer more than 200 of them, because there's all kinds of nuances, and art shows are my mainstay prior to the pandemic. I directly solicit feedback, and always have, and in fact still do, to find ways to improve the stuff. And that's what came up with several of the materials. A lot of people found that, like, as an example, my most popular brush is my blended brush of goat and synthetic fibers. Where's the camera? There we go. And so this one, the black part is the goat hair. That's 90% of the composition. This is 10%, although it's mixed. I'm going to turn it that way, see if we can get a good picture of it. The motions are all reversed on the camera. This is funny. Well, anyway, you can't see
it's hard to get used to. I know.
But anyway, they're pretty well known at this point. They produce an ultra-fine point, but you can also get a real nice sense of feedback. You can tell what's going on the point. And in addition to that, the goat hair holds so much liquid that you take the two, and it's literally synergy in a paintbrush. You get the best attributes of both of them. And I didn't know it at the time, because I was just trying to solve a problem of a paintbrush that holds a lot of liquid, and which also has a fine point, and which is also easy to control. And by the way, which doesn't cost $200 or $300 for a big brush, because of the rarity of the material.
Your pricing is very fair.
You kind of broke up there a little bit on me,
Oh, sorry. I
but I
said that
try and
the
make it as
price point
competitive
is
as I
huge
can.
because your pricing is really fair, very competitive.
Thank you so much. I try, and it's as I'm doing more and more of these, I'm actually starting to do a little bit of repricing. I'll have it figured out by the end of the year. But like my silver fox brush, as far as I know, I'm the only person on the entire planet that makes a brush out of silver fox. It comes from the guard hairs, and it's really hard to find materials in the way that I do, number one, and you can only use a small percentage. I get pelts for silver foxes from usually like estate sales and off of Craigslist, and I try and be as environmentally sensitive and responsible as I can realistically and still maintain my obligations. So I get as many of these materials as I can through like estate sales or through Craigslist or through secondary partner. I can't think of the terms partners, whatever you call it, sources. As a small volume paintbrush maker, which I am, it's really hard or impossible to get the attention or the response from any of the major manufacturers. I go to a group that offers synthetic bristles, as example, which are like outrageously popular the world over, and I don't have $100,000 to buy bristle material. It just doesn't exist in the volume I work with, and a lot of the people that distribute this stuff and sell it won't have anything to do with me. So I've had to be very, very creative in how I find the materials. And I got really lucky because going back to the school thing, I'm very good at researching. And I will exhaust every avenue and then I'll figure out what went wrong and then go down other avenues until I find what I need. I'm unstoppable once you get me going. And it's led to finding some really good exotic materials. And in the case, going back to Silver Fox, for some really great, highly innovative brushes. Silver Fox will literally produce, I have a digital caliper I use for a lot of things, and Silver Fox can literally produce a line that is 1/2 the width of an average human hair. That's saying something. That's a very, very fine tip. And to make a brush do that, you can't just have one hair at the tip because, as you know, there is a friction point on brushes. And so you have to have enough so it survives normal use for quite some time. And natural hair is delicate that way, but Silver Fox is, if you work with brushes, so you have a unique opportunity to work with stuff. Kolinsky's are about the best known brushes around, and if you tug on a Kolinsky, you'll find it's very elastic this way, and that's part of the reason that they last so well. Well, Silver Fox, being even smaller diameter, it's also very tough. They're the guard hairs, and they're like the outermost exposed hair, so by nature they're really tough, but they're also incredibly fine. And anyway, I could go on and on about this stuff, and I don't mean to get too bogged in it. But the point is that the Silver Fox brush is highly innovative in its performance. It will outperform a Kolinsky, which I believe is saying something. But it takes a lot of work to make them. And going back to the point I was making about prices, as I've made more and more of these, I get a sense of what it actually takes when I know what I'm doing. You start anything and you don't want to establish your price structure and your price structure based upon the first 10 or the first 100 or maybe even the first 500 that you make. But when you know how to make them, then you get a real sense as to what it costs. And so slowly I'm reintroducing prices so that I'm actually not actively losing money on the process. And it's one of the things you learn. I'm the only guy that does this, so there's no basis you can find. You can go to Princeton and find out what they offer for brushes, but Princeton makes really good, as a lot of other people do, brushes in the genre of what's entirely average. You can get it, you know it's going to fall apart in a year or two, and you have no expectation that it's going to be anything. Yeah, that's what they do. It's just the whole industry is that way. And I could go on for a long time about the paintbrush industry too. I learned that some time ago when I first, so I started out doing shows. Shows are great, but you always like to find more stable markets. And so I reached out to some of the distributors, some of the bigger paintbrush and art suppliers, and they won't even talk to a small manufacturer. And honestly, I can't supply 100 stores. There's just no way. And so you talk to some of the smaller ones and you learn bits and pieces about the industry. And I don't want to go into that in any degree of detail, but the industry is really locked down. You see the same brushes at virtually every store because those folks have been able to do the economics of scale and do a deal that works out for the entire marketplace. Mine are entirely different. I offer the highest quality that's available in anything.
Yeah,
and I want a brush that you're going to be delighted to use. And then, so thank you. And I think I'm the only brush maker that offers a lifetime warranty for materials and workmanship. There is a thing called normal wear and tear. You can't stop that. My brushes are not made of any super materials, just good materials and put together in the most reliable way that they can. But it earns them the ability to be used for years and years. Going back to my cousin Keith, who started all of this, he has some customers who are now among some of the YouTubers. It's kind of ironic that way, that have used his brushes for 20 plus years. And me, I am very competitive, and I have spent years competing with the ghost of my cousin to outperform his brushes. New materials and more innovations make that possible. And so it has been very helpful to have like the world's best teacher in my cousin Keith, who actually told me very little about the brushes, but I've seen photos of them online, and that was the basis for some of what I did. And then my being competitive by my nature and liking to do research, I found materials that outperform what he was working with, which is saying something. And so I offer some of the same stuff he did, and a lot more that simply wasn't around or wasn't as good. The whole market of synthetics has not existed. Like the past 5 years has been revolutionary for what they can do. So anyway, this is me ranting. I can go on like this. So.
No, it's okay. It's
sure,
great.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you about the process, one specific question, but before that, I do want to share with you. Pam says, I had 2 surgeries on my right hand. The brushes enabled me to paint without pain. So delightful. So it looks like you're doing a lot of things right. And I have to add to that. That's definitely one of the things I noticed about the brushes is, and I just tend to, I have a bunch of art materials laying down on the table, and I just reach out to things automatically. And I find that I am reaching out automatically to your brushes a lot, all the time probably, because they're so comfortable. Even the thinner ones, not just the wider grip, like this one I use all the time to get thinner lines, to do inking, in watercolor, using just a very dark paint for some of my illustrations. I constantly reach through these. So good job.
Well, thank you. I can't tell you how honored I am. And that part of the outreach of going out to a YouTube professional such as yourself was a real gamble, because the nature of brushes is extremely personal. And people get used to working with the brush and they never walk away from it. And I have been, you just pointed it out, people that you go to an art show, and number one, my booth is typically amongst the busiest at any show because it's interactive, and also because the brushes.
You told me about that. What's the interactivity? I wonder. Can you elaborate?
What's the what? Say that again, please.
Interactivity. How is it interactive? In what way?
Well, so I offer, when you come up to my booth, I have a bunch of work areas set up. Each work area has probably at least a half a dozen different lines of brushes. Each brush is shown in 3 different sizes. In addition to that, I offer a product called Magic Paper, which is a reusable practice cloth. Someday I'm going to have to remember to have some of that with me so I can show it over time when I get around to making YouTube videos. In that day when I actually have the time to start that, the Magic Paper will be the first one, because it is the coolest tool in the universe. And you work with a clean brush and water, and it's great for doing technique. Anything you do will disappear in about 5 minutes, so you can't do much serious work with it. But painting, as you know, is getting familiar with doing a lot of different shapes and curves and combinations and on and on and on. And the more expressive work tends to take more elaborate brushwork. It's just the way it's built in. Well, this allows you to develop all that without, Magic Paper is what I'm referring to, without having to throw away literally thousands of pieces of paper. A sheet of Magic Paper will last probably for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. I've had people that bought them going back to my first year of doing shows, and they still use them today with a regular basis. So it's a really cool toy. And I want to show it to people because literally for the cost of decent paper, you can get 1 sheet of Magic Paper and it will last you for years. And it's the best. It's a conversation piece. It's a tool. It's a toy. It's perfect. And you can roll it up when you're not working with it. Well, anyway, so that's at the workstation, the Magic Paper and the brushes. And of course, you get me on the other side that can run my mouth, and I talk with 4, 5, 6, 10 people at a time going back and forth. So it's really fun. So the experience allows people to try brushes that they've never tried before without having to use paint and make an unbelievable mess. There's a limitation as to what you can do at an art show. And but people that have never seen my brushes before will buy anywhere from, of course, none of them on occasion, but most will buy 1, 2, 3. I've had people buy 20 of them. It doesn't happen every time, of course, but it does. And they're just that different from anything else anybody's ever worked with. And you proved the same point. You pick them up and they're increasingly becoming a go-to for you. And that speaks very highly of the brushes, because professional artists know what they're doing, and there's a long list of nuances they have to do right to get through there. And because I've gotten a lot of feedback, I continue to get better and better at doing that type of thing. And so that's the interaction. And I also can show some of the minor techniques that the brushes do. There's different strokes you can do to like do some of the calligraphy stuff where you make a pelican or you make some bamboo or all the typical things that show off the breadth of what the brushes can do. And they're nothing if not very versatile. They're so well built, they're just not going to fall apart with typical uses for them. And so you can do things like use the brushes on their side where like a 1-inch long brush, you can get a 1-inch long
do that
stroke
all
with
the time.
And yeah, and the trick is you just have to slow it down a little bit. Well, most brushes, they would leave a vapor trail behind them of broken bristles if you tried that, but not mine. And so that's where that comes in. And then the difference in the bristles is about providing both suitability for different materials. Watercolor is probably my biggest marketplace, and pottery is right next to it. Those are my two biggest groups that buy brushes. And that's just shifting popularity is what it comes down to. But
it's the same brushes, or are they different for pottery?
Well, potters typically like longer bristle brushes, but not always. There's some potters, I'm going to just drop one name. His name is Charlie Teft. He shows off my brushes a lot, and there's a couple others that do as well. And but Charlie likes to do figure drawings and very highly detailed work with glazes and oxides and underglazes, which is a trick unto itself, a non-trivial one, because as you know, with pottery, you don't really know what the end result is going to be until you've done it a whole lot of times, because the colors change and the viscosity and the density changes. And Charlie's just like a master at that stuff, and his works are just phenomenal. And so he uses a lot of the same brushes that watercolor artists do, the goat and synthetic being the chief amongst them. And they're very resilient. That's the beauty of synthetics, is they'll stand up to working with the ground rock that is pottery. And they last quite well with that. But there is some overlap. Potters like using the longer bristle brushes. They like using the synthetic bristle brushes because with pottery and natural hair brushes, they're a good mix for performance purposes, but for longevity, not so much, because it's literally like working on concrete when you get right down to it.
Yeah.
Pottery is, as you know, very, very finely ground stone, and you fire it and get rid of all the organics and turn it all to glass at that point. So a long life and pottery brushes are not two things that come together often, unless you use my brushes, especially the synthetic ones. So there's a lot of overlap in what takes place in what the brushes do. The key thing for pottery is that the longevity of the brush is really important. And because most potters move a lot of volume, probably by weight, 100 times what a watercolor artist does, the brushes really need to hold a lot. And that's where some of my springier brushes found their origin. And just like I get feedback at art shows from both potters and watercolor artists, one of the shows that I do or try to do every year is called the NCECA show. That's a group for potters. NCECA is short for the National Council for the Education of Ceramic Arts. Way too long of a title, which is why they call it NCECA. Anyway, they have a conference every year, and there is something like, I'm going to make up numbers and say 5,000 to 8,000 potters that show up from either all over the United States or in some cases all over the world. And there is one guy that has really good handmade brushes. And so like my booth is just swamped from the beginning to the end of that show. And it's I didn't know going into this that was going to be the response, but it's been just phenomenal. And it's part of why doing art shows is so fun, because who doesn't like being surrounded?
Prepared for that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it's just amazing. It's well, at a show I will sell anywhere between 300 and to over 400 brushes in 3 to 4 days. And but I move nonstop, and most of the shows I do myself, and it's literally moving as fast as I can all day long, and I love it. It's fun. I've never been afraid of work or working hard or putting in long hours. It's what you do to get ahead in life, if you're lucky at that. But so I have no problem to do the work that's involved in it, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I wonder, what part of let's say of the work you enjoy the most? Is it the more, let's say, salesperson kind of a thing, or instructing people, or is it the more back end creativity in your own kind of peace and quiet? You know what I mean?
Well, there's a mix, and it all fits together really nice. I tend to enjoy the moment in total. It's such a bizarre lifestyle. Right. So as an IT guy, people invite me into companies with 10, 20, 30, 100 or more people that work there. And before I one step into the building, for the first time ever, they're going, okay, how soon can you get us back to work? It's very, very stressful work, and I'm good at it. I've done it for a long time. So it's really rare for me to not run into a problem. And I like the whole cycle of it. Same thing with making the brushes and going. The travel is fun. the air travel, thank God, is the boringest part of the whole thing, because you don't want air travel to be exciting at all. No
Yeah,
drama on the
just
airplane, please.
relaxing.
And right, and so I actually, on my website, I had the really good luck of literally it took me 4 years to develop my website, just because I have no spare time. And I actually did most of the development on the website, flying between the West Coast and the East Coast to do shows and back. And I found that it's actually a bad idea, after working your ass off for 4 or 5 days in a row, to actually try and do something meticulous and productive, because the energy level's just not there, and weird things happen on a plane. So I ended up giving up doing that on the trip back, but on the trip out, yeah, it's a way to burn up the energy that's there. So I don't really have a favorite part. There's no part that I like. Well, there's one part I like the least. One of the first steps in making the brushes is to take the handles, and then I wear a full face respirator. I use that a lot. It's not uncommon, but it's the one with the 2 big masks on it with organic vapor cartridges. And I go outside winter or summer, and I use very, very fine steel wool and use it to scrub the bamboo. And I use isopropyl alcohol, 90%. I don't know if you've ever worked with it, but if you get that stuff on your hands, it's like having ice on your hands. And so I wear latex gloves, and I wear an overlay of rubber gloves over that. And then the wintertime up at my cabin, it's in the mountains, and so it can be like below freezing out there, and it's really gruesome to have to deal with something that freezes your hands while it's already below freezing out. So that is my least favorite thing to do.
But to appreciate the brushes even more.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, that is like the most obnoxious thing to do. There's tools you can get to do that, but they're like $5,000, and they require probably about a quarter of that for putting in the electricity. I just don't have the budget to buy those tools. So this is me out in 30-degree weather and summer weather, cleaning this stuff up. But it's a necessary step. I've tried to, like I said before, there's over 50 steps. I've tried to eliminate any one of them I can, because it translates to time. And you can't. So one of the last steps I do is to use what's called the buffing wheel. It's a big piece of fleece that's fairly rigid, and you put it on a wheel that spins at 3,000 RPM. And speaking for myself, I wear body armor, because sometimes the brushes get caught by the wheel and it gets spit back at me at 3,000 RPM. It's not a fun experience. Literally, the thing can send a full-size brush 20 feet across the room and smack it into the wall hard enough to break it. So you don't want to mess with these tools. They're very powerful, but they work well. Well, anyway, the reason I mentioned this is that I tried to do the cleaning of the bamboo using the buffing wheel, and it worked really good for about the first 5, but all the stuff that gets on the bamboo gets transferred to the wheel, and then you have to replace the wheel, and it's a huge time sink to have to stop the wheel and replace it or try and clean it. So you just can't skip any of the steps. It's just built in.
What's your favorite step?
My favorite step for the brushes is probably when I'm done with them, and they can, I mean, I'm never done. So I do the build, and then I bring them back to my home/office, and they get sorted into boxes based on type and size, yada, yada. And then when somebody makes an order, I take them out, I inspect them very closely. You can't see it, but it's just off to my right. I have a very strong magnifying glass that I use to go over the brushes with literally a fine-tooth comb. I can show you the fine-tooth comb if you want to see it. I had to hunt for that too. And if there's any stray hairs, or sometimes you get some that are not quite uniform as you want, I go through all that stuff and I fix them before they go out the door, so that every person gets the highest quality end product that they can. So what I'm trying to say is the work never really stops until it's in the envelope or the packing container and out the door for me. And but definitely cleaning them with isopropyl alcohol is the least favorite part. Just with alcohol, you have to be careful because it's really volatile. And so I use a fan to dissipate the fumes, but even the motor that pushes the fan creates a lot of sparks, right? So you don't want to catch that stuff on fire. And you just have to be very careful about the environment when you're working with that. Same thing, ironically, I use solvent-based paints on the things, and it's the same problem, but in a different way. To paint, I have to be in a more controlled environment, but I still have to get rid of the fumes because they are very toxic. And I'm old to begin with. It doesn't take too much to push me off what's left of the rails. So I'm very, very cautious about how I approach that stuff. So that's the least favorite. And then I could just go.
One thing I really
it's a lot
like
of fun.
about
It really
them
is. I chose it.
Is the unique design.
Go ahead.
I love how each of them is very different, and this is one of my favorites actually. And I keep the tags on them so I don't forget what they are.
And yeah, ironically, with the tags are yet another source of endless research. So I bought a bunch of different tags, And then the ones that I ended up getting, because the bamboo surface is what it is, the tags literally, if the tape wasn't on them, they would fall off in a matter of seconds. It's a really, really soft adhesive. And then the tape I use for the same reason, because the last coat that I put on the brushes is linseed oil. And linseed oil will dry and harden. It has a nice scent. It works well. You can do it every year. But if you were to put a piece of tape on it, you'd pull it off. So I get this wall-safe tape that I put on this non-adhesive adhesive to make the whole thing stick together. Which is the long way of saying I'm surprised the label is still on it. So it's,
it is still, all of them are still on.
Again, every detail you have to pay attention to. Yeah. But anyway, that handle is one of my wangy handles. The most common question I get asked is, how do you pronounce wangy? So it's like the word wang and the word ghee, like the butter thing put together. And but it's charming to hear all the variants that come out of that word. So Wangi is one, or Wanji is one of the most common ones. So I love it.
Do you have any design philosophy looks-wise, or is it more dictated by the usability, let's say, or utility?
Well, it's the classic form follows function. Bamboo, by its very nature, is very unique, and because I get my bamboo from gardens and groves, they are ever changing. It's actually the bane of my existence, but it's such a good material for handles. It's like the perfect. It's comfortable for the hand. It lasts forever. Part of the design of the brushes, going back to that for a second, is to make the handles relatively oversized. With bamboo, you have to do it. The diameter of the bamboo determines the size of the opening, and I measure each opening to make the bristles specifically for that. And but what you end up getting is something that's slightly larger, and it's subtle, but it really plays a strong effect on not getting the hands tired. And if your hands don't get tired, your wrist doesn't, your elbow doesn't, your shoulder doesn't, your neck doesn't. And so it's a small things, but it's really key. There's another variant I make. I should have thought to bring them, but there's a variant I have that is either...
For the line art, I did this very thin lines just yesterday. All of this little tiny details. I did with the thin one, with the small brown synthetic. So just, I love them. I don't get tired using them at all. And it takes time, and it's super, accurate, thin kind of line work, which can be very straining. And it never has any effect.
And they're very, the fine points are one of my areas of specialties, and I found several different materials that allow me to do that and hold a lot of liquid. So even my itty bitty brushes are just shocking in the amount of liquid that they'll hold for a brush that's like less than 1 millimeter in diameter, and less than 2 millimeters of diameter. And anyway, I lost my train of thought there. I was looking at one of the comments and I was wondering what was being said. So I have to ask somebody, Gwyneth Marie, I'm not even going to try the last name. There's just the newest post that I'm seeing. It said the brushes mentioned are not in your country. Well, I just sell my brushes directly from my website, so you can get them any place that I can ship them to. If there's a question, let me know what you're interested in. I'll be happy to find out. At this point, I've sent my brushes to, I don't know exactly, it's between 40 and 50 different nations. It's like, of the million things that you keep track of as a business person, entrepreneur, brush maker, it's just hard to keep up with. I'm honored. I can't, like in the first year, I've reached around the world. I've had artists from literally every country on earth has come to my website in the first year. Can you believe that? That's courtesy of people such as yourself that have just this extraordinary reach and that are interested. And but I ship my brushes everywhere. I have yet to find a country where I can't send them to. Not that I've tried. There's like 190 of them, I think, but I like someplace between 40 and 50, which is a pretty good statistical sample. And so let me know. Send me a note. Let me know your address, because I need to know the specific address to be able to send it to. And and
if you have any other questions, of course, write them down and we will go over them. But again, for stuff like that, of course, feel free to reach out, right, Tracy?
Yeah, sure. It's just
people are praising
that's what
the
lost my train of thought when I was talking about other brushes. And so anyhow, back to making the brushes. So as I find that I do things, and they keep leading to more different brush designs. People keep asking me, not necessarily asking, can you make this? So I get a lot of that too, but people say, I like this, but if it could do this, and then I'll find a way to achieve that goal. And then I offer a new brush. So it just grows and grows. And
I do want to mention there is a promo code. Yes, I'm going to show it right now.
Go ahead, Liron, take it away.
So yeah, be sure to check it out. I have this cool banner, which is so Tracy. Here's a fun short story. I actually started streaming on StreamYard, which is this software that allows me to do all these cool graphic things, just so that I can do this kind of a thing in an interview. It was for yours actually. So there we go. You see the banner?
Wow, I didn't know that.
That's the website. And also, I wrote sure. You see? Be sure to use coupon code Liron. You get 20% off. And as you told me, just as a note, and you can find it in the description, start of September, you said it's going to go down to 10%, right?
That's correct. And
it's not like a marketing ploy or anything like that. You've done some recalculations, and that's going to be the new norm, I suppose. Is that correct?
It's unlikely to go back to 20% unless we have another pandemic or a major recession. I am happy to be the first guy to acknowledge reality and create an opportunity where it doesn't exist. But it has been a challenge for me. Anyway, I won't go into it, but I simply need to increase the prices to be able to continue to make brushes and distribute them the way I do. And so that's what that's behind. During the pandemic, as soon as I heard about it, I dropped my discount from having never offered a discount on my brushes to a very generous 20% off. And it has worked really well. The economy is recovering nicely, and it has been I'm basically treading water to sell my brushes at that kind of discount, and I simply need to pay some bills like everybody else does. So
yeah, I think one of the smartest things you can do is what you did, and that's actually reaching out to different creators and painters, because with a product that's as good as yours, the main thing it needs is exposure. And I do think by just providing them for free, if it's good enough, and if you communicate the right way, which you have, you'll get people that continue promoting them because they enjoy them. And that's my case. And I think it's one of the smartest things you can do. So great job on that. I actually wanted to ask you, do you have a lot of interactions with painters? Not necessarily content creators or people who have some kind of a web presence, but even people who purchase the brushes. Do you have an interaction where they give you feedback, or they talk about their trouble, stuff like that? I'm curious to hear.
Oh, absolutely. We were talking about this a little bit before, but correspondence, when you start working in the social media world, is like career number 1 or 2. It becomes the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And I've known people for a long time, and I've been in the arts a big part of my life anyway, so I have a lot of friends that, I solicit feedback, and I try and get that. It helps me to improve the brushes, and of course, you develop friendships. I have my art show buddies that I see all over the country, and I have artists from every show that contact. Yeah, it's fun. It's an extended family type of thing, and very, very enjoyable. And so, yeah, absolutely. I actually have developed 3 or 4 brushes expressly because some people asked me some stuff. I wanted to touch on that. So there's one that I make that has a handle made of bamboo rhizome. So the wangi brush that you showed a little bit earlier, that is sometimes known as the running root. If you have ever seen bamboo that starts out at a neighbor's house over there and it ends up over there, the wangi handle is the reason. I get the stuff that I get from Indonesia, not because they make the best wangi in the world, but it's about the only place you can find such an obscure material. And so there's another type that's called rhizome. The wangi runs from here to there. Rhizome is the difference between, so the rhizome, and I should have brought one, I didn't think about it. The rhizome is what the bamboo actually grows out of right there. So it's roughly pistol grip shaped, and they actually make really good handles. And so people that sometimes have a minor tremor or sometimes have problems, they've had an injury or arthritis or a million things go wrong with the hand, and you can't necessarily use the fine motors. Well, the thing is, a brush forces you to hold it in one way, but you could actually hold it like this or any way you can hang on to it, and you can use it, but it's not very comfortable to do that. So these grip things, I might, if I get a second, I can run away and find one. But anyway, these grip things allow you to hold it like a pistol grip. And it's very comfortable when you can hold it so the bristle is up, the bristle is down, the bristle is sideways. And if you can't form the fine point that you do to do that, these allow you to continue painting. And some people that have, let's say, a minor tremor for whatever reason, if they change the way they hold the brush, then they no longer have the tremor. And that's the difference between losing your love of painting and being able to maintain it. So that's one of the lines of brushes that I offer. And
it's literally changing people's lives.
And a good brush can definitely do that. It also just makes the job easier. And I get time after time, people will write me back about my brushes, and they say just the nicest things about them. It's one of the quirks of perks of doing what I do, and it's very good for the sense of fulfillment from doing that. But some of the best ones are folks that use those brushes that told me that they'd have to abandon painting before, but they're able to go back to it. And it can actually make the difference. And once again, I'm the only person that has gone, how can I help these people? And so I have some things that are out there. In the future, I will add some to them because there's variations of that for different types of hand problems. I'm just started, like literally a month ago, 2 months ago, to reach out to some orthopedic surgeons to see what they recommend for people who like to do it for paint therapy, hand therapy. And then one of the artists that I'm working with also specializes, she's going to graduate school right now for art therapy. And we've been collaborating actually a little bit longer than you and I have been, but it's the same type of thing about the same time. And so I'm hoping to be able to get some work done with her before too terribly long. Excuse me, hang on a second. I'm running out of voice.
It's okay. I was going to say that, regardless of the irregular shape of the brush, which is great because you don't develop the calluses in the same spots, just the fact that they're made of bamboo and not metal, for example, has been huge for me. Even just the sweat and the way it handles with metal and it gets slippery, and sometimes it can become painful if you're painting for long hours. Just the material itself, I think, is so superior in a way.
Well, thank you. And I try to use the best in everything I can in every single brush I make. Quality is my number one goal. Quality and performance are what drives the company entirely. Because if I can't do a better job than you can get at a paint store, why are you paying me the ridiculous overpriced amount for my brushes just because they're handmade? I realize there's an aesthetic to it, but the functionality is the most important thing in what I make. And that drives a lot of the choices that I have for the brushes. If they literally, I mean, just as a practical sense, if my brushes can't outperform, there's no point to the exercise. And that's when you go as a business thing. When you go into business, the goal is to solve a problem or fill an itch or do something that somebody else can't do. And I have a really good aunt. She was my cousin Keith's mom. She said a long time ago, when you go into business, you have to make a decision about whether you actually want to sell something or if you just want to put a high price tag on them. And so you have to find what actually works and what the market will accommodate. And it's been a challenge to do that. But like I said, I've been fortunate because my cousin was a really good guide, even indirectly. And the times that we've been in, I started doing the brushes shortly after the Great Recession. And so it was a challenge then. And then I will not deny that the prices creeped up a little bit as you learn what you're doing. You got to pay your expenses. Nobody in the arts is getting rich except after they're dead when they get $100 million for a painting that's from the 15th century. So you can't really get a return on investment as a career thing that way. And but it looks great on the resume. I mean, look at Leonardo's resume. Nobody can touch it, Speaking of things that are beyond reality, the guy was a really good artist, but he wasn't that good. He was innovative as hell. He did things the first time anybody did, but it's not like his skills were superhuman. They're pretty darn good. I mean, you can't take anything away from the guy, and he deserves it. But time and this mania that's developed over him is what's really led it. He's no better than Tintoretto or Raphael or Giotto or any of the other guys. They all did about the same stuff. They did the same colors. They hung out together and probably got drunk as often as they painted. And who knows? But the point is, they weren't that great. They weren't any better than anybody that's come after them. In fact, the development of techniques puts them at a considerable disadvantage because they were like 2 steps away from bearskins and stone knives by means of tools available to them.
I have to say, if you compare them to current art, there are artists today that are better. Technically, you could say it's all about the innovation.
It's a wash it now. And as far as the real key to the Renaissance, I studied art history for a lot of years, so we just dropped into a black hole, and I'm going to run away real quick on that. But the real key to the Renaissance was the combination of natural colors and understanding perspective, and those guys were the first people that actually did anatomical studies. And I would maintain that's a long way around. Art school doesn't have an anatomy and physiology part where they drag you out to the hospital to see how the inner ear works so you can paint music better. But anyway, I'm kind of making some of this stuff up. But the point is that they took it to an extreme, and that's why it was revolutionary, because they were building the world around them as far as redesigning how art works. And man, they did a good job, But the first transition out of creating this realist perspective was to start to mess with it and make cartoons. Remember Mannerism and the late Mannerism and all the yada yada that came right on the heels of the Renaissance. It's like they came up with this brilliant, innovative way, and it lasted, 15, 20 years, and then they threw it away and started making cartoons out of them. It's the funniest thing in history. So it's like the comic pages ultimately win in all forms of art. Anyhow, so how did I get off on that digression? I was just talking about the comparable nature of arts then and now, and they were really, really good, but they don't have the tools we have. Look at papers now. They have on modern papers what's called the receptor layer. They actually designed this so you put a drop of watercolor on it and it doesn't spread anywhere. It does exactly what you want it to do. And contrast that with some of the stuff they were working in the Renaissance. They were making their own pumice, or I can't think of the word, handmade paper, papyrus. And using skins, and they were really crude materials they were working on. So they had to build the substrate, and then it's so much harder than it is now. Is where I'm going with all of this.
And I wonder, if you look at the brushes you make, talking about innovation, is there something that you feel like is unique just to you that no one else does, and you would like maybe even to see other companies do? Something that you're onto, Hopefully they don't have people listening, so they don't steal it.
Oh, they do. And one of the I won't go too much into that, but I've had some groups that have already tried to knock me off. And the thing about the brushes is you can't duplicate in 5 steps what you did in 50 steps. It's just not there. But you can make them look similar. And but anyway, the most innovative brushes I have, in my humble opinion, are number 1, my Goten Synthetic Blend, which is my most popular brush. It's a combination of 90% goat hair, which is actually designed for makeup brushes. So as far as quality of the goat hair, it's the best that I could find. Right, and also very absorbent. And also the synthetic is the same material I use in my soft white synthetic, and it's uniformly blended, so it gives you this ultrafine point with great responsiveness, and it holds a lot of liquid. And so it's a great brush to work with in any size. People love the bigger ones. They love the smaller ones. Nobody I've come across has ever not really liked them, and or even said anything negative about them. So it's really quite literally a revolution. And number 2 is my Silver Fox brushes, which are actually a way better brush than the Goat Synthetic, but they're just so expensive that not a lot of people can afford them, and I understand that. Siberian Elk is the same thing. It's a very rare material. I stumbled across it. I try all kinds of stuff, and it is, for responsiveness and feel, it's my personal favorite of all the brushes that I have. And then the other innovation, which I do better than anybody else on the planet, I guess, are my handles. They are totally unique to me. And it's just a sheer byproduct of the amount of work and the attention to detail that makes them what they are. And the handle is so important because it's the user interface. It's like the keyboard for working with a brush, and it's got to be comfortable. I don't know if you've noticed it overtly because it's a really subtle thing, but bamboo has a very slight, you can wiggle it ever so slightly, especially the smaller ones. But what that means is that the brush will deflect into your hand, so tensions in the hand and every place else with people come and go. And these allow you to absorb some of that, and it's a very strong psychological thing, is that by being so yielding, it actually helps to keep people calm down. I've asked folks about it, and it's too subtle to be obvious, but enough people have said it's true that I'm going with it, or at least it's a good plausible line of BS, if nothing else. You never know for sure. But the truth is that bamboo, it is flexible, and it does help relax the hand. And I think the real secret sauce for my brushes, I try and do everything right. There's always room for improvement, but my handles are truly the one thing that nobody else on the planet offers, as well as a couple of bristle types. But unless you never try them, you never know the difference. And but the handles are the biggest deal out there. They're very comfortable to work with, and
I definitely feel like I had a few very relaxing painting sessions. So it could be thanks to that. I'm serious, by the way. I'm so in the process, and I'm so focused and immersed that,
yeah, I do. You do that so well. When I get a spare moment, I watch videos to try and learn more and more, because the feedback loop is endless for me. If I can learn something to do a better job. Oh, that reminds me. I want to remind you, while we're on camera, I asked you a long time ago, and I know you're a very busy man. I mean, we talked about this a little offline, but being involved in social media means that you work from the moment you get out of bed till you go to bed 3 hours late, so you can get those other things done. But we talked a while ago, there's a favorite Escoda brush that you like to work with, and I would love you to get a picture of that next to a ruler, and I'll make you one of mine that hits the same proportions. I'd rather see you using mine all the time than theirs. So if you think about it,
actually haven't used it for a long time. You know what's funny?
Oh,
I
that's
haven't used it
surprising.
for a while. The reason is, it's funny. It's a bit larger than, let's say, these two.
Right.
These are the large. Yeah, you don't need me to even read the label. But the thing is, it's larger, which I like, just for more capacity for larger pieces. But because just now I think about it, because these are super comfortable, I've actually been using them even though they're smaller. So I just work a little faster with more water. I just now realized, if we wouldn't have talked, I wouldn't have thought of that. So I actually am curious to hear.
Thank you.
It's funny. Yeah. What's the largest, let's say, size you can produce? Is there even a limit, or is it kind of what's the most common large size? If I want to say paint a half a sheet or a sheet, a full sheet, or more than that, I guess.
I don't follow traditional sizes. When I first started out, I started to look into what continuity you can find, and brush sizes are just one of the most difficult ones there is then. But so I go with absolute measurements.
The thickness is different, right, of the different
Right,
materials.
well, the thickness varies and the lengths vary, and what one person calls a size 6 brush may be a size 8 or not exist in another person.
Yeah, that's my experience.
By person, I mean brush maker. It's just impossible. So I tend to go with absolute sizes. And then a funny thing I found when I became an internationally known brush maker is that only a small percentage of the world uses English measurements, inches and fractional inches. And so as I'm getting time, and if you look at the website, you'll find that I haven't done it but like maybe 2 or 3 pages, but I'm also putting millimeter sizes on that. But anyway, back to your question, probably the biggest I've done is about 25 millimeters where the handle meets the bristle. And the problem is with bamboo, the size of the bamboo determines the size of the opening. And so to have a big brush, you have to have a brush that's so large that a lot of people don't like to work with them. So what I've done, and I haven't developed them yet, but I have another line that uses, I'm going to grab just a brush that I have here. So small diameter brush, this is almost leaning towards a medium size, and then with a much bigger diameter top on it, so it allows me to have some much bigger brushes with handles that are more comfortable to work with.
But then it's a bit harder to have it come to a point. Is that correct?
Yeah, the pointy brushes are my area of specialty. I might expand my goat line a little bit more so that I don't produce those to do a form, because people love them as mops, and nobody's ever complained about the point on it. But I'm thinking if you want to make a real mop, then it wants to be a broader tip. And there's endless brushes I could make, but
that still has a good tip.
One person. Correct. And so these will be probably, let's just say, because bamboo varies in the 20 to 30 millimeter diameter, and they'll be much easier to hold because they've got a small diameter tip on them. And they're absolutely gorgeous. I'm putting them all together from the prettiest components that I can find. So they're not going to be, shall we say, inexpensive, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. And then one of the things with bamboo is that you don't really want to drill out the opening, because if you do, it'll stress the bamboo, and bamboo breaks if you stress it. You just want to leave it alone. And but I have to attach the tip to the base. And so I probably did 20 experiments to come up with a technique that works for that. And it literally involves putting some casting material inside the bamboo and then drilling into the casting material, so you put no strain on the bamboo and it all stays together as one piece. So ridiculously elaborate. I'm pushing bamboo where it's not supposed to go. And
what's interesting, if you produce something with a very thick handle, I'm actually fine with trying it out. I wonder, because I don't know why, intuitively it feels like I would actually like that. Not super thick, but even thicker than you would think to sell.
Sure, it relaxes the hands substantially. People look at it and they go, oh no, I think I have to have this itty bitty thing the size of a toothpick to do fine detail work. But in fact, you don't. You can do it, and it's more comfortable to do it with a bigger diameter. So it's hard to convince people that. It's a real leap of faith. It shows I can put it in their hands and say, try it. And they try it and they walk away with 1 to 20 brushes. It's just the best thing. But it's hard to duplicate that on the web. And that's part of what the outreach does. And it's been effective, but it's a bit of a leap of faith for folks. So that's part of why I ask people when they're signing up to let me know where their area is, and if I'm going to do a show in their area, I will be happy to go that route. And it brings more people into the booth, and it gives you an opportunity to try things that you'd be reluctant to try otherwise. So thank you for mentioning that. I really do appreciate the handle size issue.
And one more thing I'm curious about is, do you paint yourself? Do you spend time painting? Aside from experimentation,
I would not call myself a painting. I messed around with it. Going to college, you do all the arts classes, and it always required a leap of faith I was not willing to take for time investment. Now, that being said, my background in school, I was an academic. I was a professional student. I went to college for 10 years. You know, I'm a nutcase. So they say college is a mental institution, and I'm a long time resident. So, but I love to write, and an average term of school later in years, I would churn out like 300 pages of documents. And when you're taking classes, you have to do like 20, 30 portraits or whatever it might be at that. And I got through that because I needed to, and I wanted to learn the techniques, but I knew early enough on that the academic side of it was more interesting to me than the performance side of it. And they really push you hard, as I'm sure you know, in art school. It's just like producing.
I don't know personally, but
300 works. You know, but I mean, that's the way you get good at something, is just to immerse yourself in it.
Of course.
And I was already pretty busy being immersed in other areas. And so painting is not my strongest point. I know the basics of it. I can draw basic figures. They're slightly more than stick figures, but I really like forms and shapes. Those are the underlying principles of all art. And if you do that, you can really mess with people's minds in a good way. You can take them to places and trigger their imagination. You do that really well. That's part of the brilliance of what you do. And I just never gave myself a chance to get there. I suppose if I had 10 years to invest in it, I've always been a pretty quick study. It wouldn't take me 10 years, but let's say realistically 5 to get good enough that I felt comfortable at it. And
or even just not to get good, but to enjoy the kind of
the process,
thing,
right?
You know?
Yeah, you have to jump over that type of thing. Music is another passion of mine. As it works out for no work on my part, I have a nearly photographic memory for music, and so I always wanted to play the flute, but I'm like the world's worst flute player. And I did some YouTube videos. They actually solved a bunch of problems with it. Okay, so I'm going to digress a little bit into the world of weird superpowers.
Cool.
And everybody has them, and we call them gifts. Because I went to school so long, I know you can learn anything if you set yourself to it. And whether you're gifted or not, you can pursue skills in a really big way. What you need is help. People like you, good tools, people like me. You can overcome huge obstacles if you're just willing to try. And it's, in my opinion, the most important thing in a life, to just be willing to try and fail. You have to accept that. That's what I tell people painting. The first 10, the first 100, they're going to suck. You're not going to be happy with it. And after a while, you'll start to find that you have a style that's uniquely your own. You can learn 100 different techniques over 20 years, and you're still going to come back to that style again because you like it and it resonates with you. And we're all the same. I mean, I know people that can knock off a Picasso, they can knock off a Rembrandt, they can do anything. But if they're just having fun, they'll fall back to the same techniques time after time after time, no matter what they have in their quiver. And I think it's the coolest thing. So anyway, once again, I'm running off the mouth on.
No, it's really interesting.
topics.
I find that I sometimes try to achieve something with my videos and try to do a certain concept, but the ones I enjoyed the most is when I let go of all of that and I only focus on painting the way I paint normally. And I find that produces the results that I enjoy the most, which is usually highly simplified, very impressionistic, but still with a hint of realism. That's what I like the most. And I do enjoy the occasional realism to break off of that and the occasional illustrative. But generally speaking, it's what I go back to every single time. And it's what I like the most. How far can I go with, tricking people into thinking something is there and there's barely anything on paper,
And you do that. I mean, you're absolutely brilliant at it. Your studies, your sense of perspective, and is second to absolutely nobody. And so you add with that a certain, I can't think of the word, I want to call it ephemeral, but it's not the right word, but there's a mystical quality of the work that you do, and it just shines through. But what I wanted to mention, moreover, is that there is, I hate to call it a zen because I hate to put cliches on top of things, but you focus on something and the rest of the world just falls away. And sure, they were very good at picking up on that, but anyway, I didn't want to get lost on terms. But when you focus on something and you get to a level of comfort, the rest of the world just disappears. I spend 10 hours, 15 hours a day in my studio doing nothing but sanding handles, and I'm good at it. And I couldn't tell you what I thought about over the span of a day like that, because so many things went through your head, everything from business to relationships to all the things we think about. But just being able to run your hand like that allows that escape because it becomes normal after a while. I never got anywhere near that good with painting. And it's the zone. Thank you, Pam. And but it comes up again and again. And painting is so much performance art that you can do this while you're running your mouth, while you're running a video camera and doing it all in real time. Man, that's just such a high quality. It's just I don't have words to describe the skill that goes
funny.
into it.
I feel like I've become worse at it. I don't know why, because the more I paint, the better I become, but the more focus it takes. It's like you learn more, you actually need to focus more. It's so weird.
Oh, absolutely. Well, part of that's called confirmation bias. We never trust ourselves, and that means that we're either going to be overly infatuated with ourselves and think it's better than it is, or not so much and think it's not so good as it is. And it's just the nature of how you were brought up and who you are and so forth. I like my work, but I always look for ways to improve it, and in ways that nobody else in the world can see. I watch enough of your work that you do the same kind of thing, and it just comes out in the form of increasing nuance. But it just affects the work in ways that are hard to quantify by words. To use a figurative term here, you need a spreadsheet and 100,000 cells to show all the different variations that are just so subtle that you wouldn't notice them by themselves. But if you were to strip those, I'm going to make up a number and say 20 things, 100 things out of the work, it would not be what it is. And it just comes so naturally. It's not necessarily the pressure you put on the brush. It's not necessarily the tools, but it's the gestalt of it, if you will. It's the whole thing that comes together in an entirely unique way, but predictable. I work with a bunch of artists now, and so when you study art history, they throw 1,000 photos at you, or as many photos as they can of any given artist during the time frame you're working in. And sometimes, like Renaissance versus Mannerism, you get artists that work during two distinct periods, and you get so that you can recognize the artist even if you've never seen the work before. You know the particulars of the technique. And I find that with yourself and with a few other artists that I work with regularly, I can see the work. It shows up regularly, and I know who it is before I even know who it is. And it's something that's utterly distinct, but utterly unique. And everybody, yourself, I know of you to work in 4 or 5 distinct styles that you do, and they get moved around and they blend, and everybody does the same thing. Any painting is 20, 30, 40 techniques. It's all a big bag of tricks when you get right down to it. But you move between them so effortlessly, and you could do a total abstract and it would still be your work. You could tell just by the nature of the way it works. Not just you, but everybody. And it's real genius that goes into doing that type of thing. So that, and the fact that you pound these things out in minutes that most mere mortals would take like a week or longer to be able to put all the details together. Well, the fluency is really what the performance
I owe that to watercolor. Watercolor is so fast, even if you're inexperienced, and it's just a faster medium. And I didn't know to appreciate it until I did experiment more with acrylics,
Oh, absolutely. As I say, you never really get to know something until you rub your nose in it, figuratively speaking, of course, a long time. And then you just, the learning curve, just like at first it's really, really challenging to learn, and you're just picking it up more and more. And then you cross a threshold and you go, oh, I can do this and I can do this. Like in my photography, I would include probably on average at least 5 or 10 different techniques in each photograph. Just to produce the effect, like the Orton effect, where you have this like blur of color and light that makes it look really soft, like something's just vanishing into dust or fumes. I like to put that in small parts of it because it's a great way to draw attention to that. It's the same type of stuff that Rembrandt was doing as far as how small lines, the fovals and I can't think of the term for orthogonals and the diminishing perspective, and all this stuff gets tossed into every painting, right? But it's automatic. You don't think about it as far as process after process after process. It's just what you learn to do. And the fluency that you show and all that stuff is just phenomenal. That's why I love your perspective studies. You do it in everything, but well, thank you. It's like you can pick that stuff up without even understanding it just by watching somebody do it. That's the beauty of it. And
and sometimes it's frustrating as a teacher that I want to verbalize every single thing I'm doing, and it's not always possible. And I try to at least mention whenever I can verbalize. So I'm like, okay, I know I'm not explaining exactly, but you have to kind of watch it and get the gist of it. It's just how it is,
Absolutely, and you're really good at it. And the thing, there's a fine line for the viewer, right? You don't want to bore them by going into too much detail, and the painting itself has to move along. And working with layers is the best way, but it's hard to illustrate that in real time because hair dryers come in really good, and I've seen some folks on YouTube that have gone from using hair dryers to using heat guns, and of course, heat guns are massive overkill, and so you can end up like crumpling the paper. I've seen one instance where it started to light on fire because they're just pushing it a little bit too hard. So, but you've got to be careful with the tools, and and the perception of what's done with painting versus the reality of the meticulous attention to detail and layer after layer, and it's not an easy thing to do, and yet it's still, especially watercolor, pure performance art. So it's just amazing. So you really, if I didn't have a hat on, if I had a hat on my balding head,
thank you.
I would take it off for you for doing a lot of things and doing them extremely well. So, hey, it's not for nothing you became a rock star in this hugely competitive world of YouTube. So I thank you. I just learned so much from watching these things.
Taking it day by day.
I like to watch videos. Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes, and I bet you do the same thing, you'll watch video for an hour or 2 hours just to pick up one little technique or two pieces that are put together in a way that you haven't thought of. Oh, I do that all the time. And you can gain so much. Part of the reason that I refine my technique is 50 steps is a lot for making a paintbrush. And if I can save 5 seconds, 10 seconds here or there, oh, that's huge, because I build anywhere from, I have different brush builds, as I call them. Anywhere, a typical brush build where I'm just trying to make a batch of handles, I have to have the handles before I can make the brushes. So I make several hundred of them at a time. And if I can find a way to get the same result or a better result and save 5 seconds, 10 seconds on a step, oh, that's just huge. I'm not kidding when I tell you I spend 10 to 16 hours a day sanding just to get a set of brushes. And and if you can increase the quality of what you're doing and save time at the same time, that's what we all shoot for. And that's where some of the painting technique comes from.
Do you produce the same hundreds of the same type of 2B brush, or is it first kind of generic and then you'll make a few changes to some?
Well, it's kind of generic in all things. So basically, I start with canes of bamboo, and then I cut them to lengths. The lengths themselves are determined by the aesthetic of the bamboo. I don't have any preconceived goals that they have to be this or this, although sometimes they do fit in with that range just for practical purposes. But generally, I look at each work as its own unique work of art. So the size determines it, and then there's minimums that you have to hit with, like I was talking before about the new line of brushes where I have a small handle and a large bristle on it. What happens with the bristles, if they're not a certain length, is that they will just crack over time. And I can't have that, obviously, because it's not good to get brushes back. I get very, very, very few of them back. And so I've had to do experiments that last like a year or 2 years where I just make the things and I throw them in a uniform environment, like average household environment, or my studio where it varies when I'm not there from 50 degrees up to about 70 when I am there, and just let them sit for a year or so to see what happens. And because I would hate to make a batch of several hundred brushes that, because of some design flaw, are all going to fall apart on me. That's the type of thing that can destroy a reputation and a business all in one fell swoop. So you have to learn that type of stuff.
And the revenue
over time. And it's bamboo is unforgiving that way, and you just will never know until a year down the line or longer if what you thought was a good idea actually worked the way you'd intended it to. So that's the worst part of dealing with bamboo, is the unpredictability of it. And over time you learn characteristics, but it varies. I just don't work with the same material all the time, so it varies greatly on that. But fortunately, so far I've been doing everything right, and I have received probably my whole career less than 10 brushes back out of several thousand of them. I was trying to remember this morning where I am. I kind of keep track of it, but not really. So when the pandemic started, I stopped even trying to keep track of it. I still make them. I could do the math, and I know all the raw numbers that I have, but I try not to get lost in the bookkeeping aspect of it. My goal right now is just to get brushes made and get them out so that people can see them. And later on, I'll continue to refine everything about it, but the goal is just to get the market. I know the market will be there because shows tell me without a doubt that people come up, they try the brushes, and the brushes outperform everything else around there. So you can't go wrong with it.
Yep. I wanted to ask, so first of all, just a logistical question, because I haven't asked you before. Are we okay with time? If you have any constraints, let me know.
Yeah, I'm fine. This is early in the day for me, so yeah, whatever we need is great. This is fun.
So I will
stop
having
fun.
Sorry, again?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna do the whole reminder to check out Lebenzon paintbrushes. Just a quick reminder. I actually wanted to and use the coupon code Liron for 20% off. Just be sure to do that. Again, beginning of September, it's gonna go down to 10%. So if you need brushes and they last, for now for me, they're awesome. So get it done, preferably I guess soon. if possible. So I thought we'd do a couple of also chat questions. I just don't see many questions. So it actually maybe will embarrass you a bit because there's a lot of kind comments. It looks like you have a lot of fans. So maybe I'll just go over some of them. Then I have maybe 2 or 3 more questions, and we'll see how it goes, okay? And by the way, if there's anything that you want to kind of bring to the conversation, something we haven't touched on, feel free to just let me know and you know.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so let's see. So Barboid says, I have a Lebenzon brush and I love it. We have John here, says, hi, Liron, hope you're well, my friend. John is a great guy. Robin Bell says, I just got mine yesterday. So it's great.
Hi, Robin.
Well, it's fantastic. Yeah, so you know the names probably of some of the people at least, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and Pam also from earlier.
Yeah, I want to say for anybody listening, I have had the great fortune, and I thank everybody out here and folks that are perhaps not listening right now. In the last 3 months, I have had, again, I can't even keep up with the numbers, but I have had a record number of sales after record number of sales after record number of sales. I have been backed up in some cases like around 150 orders trying to get them done. And it also corresponded with my first art show since the pandemic started. That completely snuck up on me. What a horror show that. I mean, it was a great show, don't get me wrong on it, but the day that I realized that, by the way, you need to have about 300 extra brushes because you've got this show coming up, it was like, oh crap, I forgot about this. And it all worked out okay. It was a really fun show. But I've just been slammed, and it's because of people such as yourself, Liron, who have told people about it, and they've been coming to the website, and just orders have been just like record.
I'm so happy to hear. You know, I was really curious. It's been a while since I got a report, so I really want to know more. Like I'm curious about the effect it had. You know, because there's a video I feel like I did a good job showing them. So I'm always curious to see, like, you know.
And it's been coming along really nicely. I have a stack of papers that's like that tall that is from I think the last 2 months. And right now, so I always prioritize getting orders out the door because customer service is the most important thing in any type of business structure. And so my first goal is always to get the orders out the door. I have to put in some new software. This is the first time I've had more than 100 orders backed up on the website. I was just astonished by it. I mean, it's like you go to YouTube and you see the number of viewers you have and you go, wow, that's really something. And then like the number triples over a short span, you start going, it's a little bit daunting, you know, it's intimidating. And some of these orders are not trivial. They I hate to go into too much detail because I respect their privacy, but yeah, there's some people that have bought 30 brushes from me recently. And that's just one order out of a lot of them. And so I've gotten behind, and that's the reason I haven't gotten the reports out on anything. And at the end of the day, I really am just one old man that's trying to do the work of 2 or 3. And the sad truth is
there a plan to get help?
Yeah, my first help is going to be somebody to help with shipping, because now that is part of my life, I could spend a week making a lot of brushes, or I can spend the week shipping, and that's the way it's been going lately. That's gotten me further behind on production. And so my next goal is to find somebody to help with that. And then the nature of the way I design the brushes from the outset, I put a lot of engineering into it. Not that I'm an engineer, but I'm a consultant and I work with engineers, and you learn how to break things down. Anyway, the goal is so that if I ever can get to the point where I'm selling enough to scale them, it becomes very easy to do. And that's part of the reason it's broken down into so many small steps. A, because it's easier to identify and solve a problem. If you make it the smallest workable problem that you can, that way you just do one thing to fix it rather than 5 things or whatever it might be. And then that means that also that as the issue scales up, I can scale up without losing. In fact, I'll actually gain quality control as I add people to do it, because it won't just be me having to do 15 things in a day to get them all done so I can plan the next day. And it just becomes just the scale of work I'm doing right now is almost beyond myself. But the reality of business is that you actually have to bring in enough money to pay for all of this stuff.
Yeah,
and
of course. Because
of the pandemic, it just hasn't been there. I've got interest, very, very wide amount of interest, but the volume of customers is not matching what I can do at an art show. Literally a month of web sales doesn't match what I can do at one show. And so it doesn't bring in the dollars. And then in addition to that, making brushes takes a lot of time. It actually collectively takes more time to package, box, drop them off at the post office than it does to make the comparable number of brushes. And so I have to be able to, probably I'm going to have to raise the shipping cost a couple of bucks before too long, just so I can cover enough to pay somebody to do that without losing money in the interest of shipping to a worldwide audience. What an irony that
and
is,
when
right?
you think about it,
And,
they are handmade. You get still an amazing value, you know?
Yeah, it's a good quality product. I don't think anybody has. And yeah, well, thank you so much for that. And I don't think anybody debates it, but you have to go to reality. Is I'm competing with $2 brushes, and it's hard for people to rationalize that until they've tried it, and then it's like, oh yes, I understand this. I should have done it a long time ago. And so I'm sure I'll get there. I have no doubt about that at all. It's just you do just like a phenomenal job, and other artists that present them. I wish I could find a way to duplicate the effect of being able to hand a brush to somebody and say, here, work with it for a couple minutes, because I know it works well and people love them and they never come back after that. I mean, people come back probably. That's an amazing thing that I found from the web. It's more obvious than doing art shows. Art shows, I go to one location in a year. There's a small number of people that are not artists. Let me rephrase that. They're not art show artists themselves, but they are artists, and they have the wherewithal to travel with some of the art shows. And so there's people that I've seen in like 5 different states, and you don't recognize them at first, but if you see somebody 2 or 3 times and you yak with them, you get to know them. And these people have told me they just like to travel and they love going to art shows, so that they follow some artists all over the country. They're groupies is what it amounts to, but in a very ungroupie type way. And so you learn that thing over time. And it's one of the funner things. And anyway, at art shows, you put the brushes in your hand and you figure it out. You work with them. You go, wow, these are really great. And people such as yourself are as close as I can get to duplicating that without being able to actually put the brushes in somebody's hand and say, here, give this a try.
That's how things work today. You know, in theory, scaling this kind of a thing will scale better than an art show eventually. It's just a matter of time and quantity, I guess. And, you know.
Oh, I agree. And then growing a business, which is what I'm doing here, you reach a certain threshold and it starts to take on a life of its own. That's what I'm seeing. Art shows are a push. You know, you have to do everything, package it down. Part of what I've done with my brushes is design them to be as compact as I can. So my whole display can fit into 2 obnoxiously big suitcases and 2 small ones. But the point is I can put it all on an airplane and go wherever I need to, and then rent equipment at the other end. It's not a lot of people that can do that. Jewelers can pull it off because their products are very small. And like doing with wall art, you could probably do it if you really worked at it and stayed away from frames, and it would be a challenge to do. And you can ship things, but you know, if you're shipping 300 pounds of boxes cross country, you don't even know if they're going to get there when you need to be there, and it just becomes a real mess. So I'm really fortunate because my brushes are very small as it goes and very light, that it allows me to travel around the country. And that's part of what I got from my cousin. That's one of the things that I learned about the business side of it. The art show circuit, that's another conversation. We'll save that for perhaps another conversation. I love to talk about art shows. They are the funnest thing.
Yeah, no, I love it too. I love it too. My experience, and my audience knows a bit about it. When I did the art fair here in Tel Aviv, it's the biggest one. It's very popular here. Now it's, of course, a bit of a problem with COVID and all of that, but I enjoyed a lot of aspects of it, just interacting with people one-on-one, selling the thing I'm making. For me, it was paintings. It was great. It was super hard to combine with doing everything else, which is why I eventually stopped. But it was a great experience, and it is a very hard job every day to come and open up the booth and place everything in there. People have no idea. They come and just browse, but you've been there 3 hours before, and you leave around the end, but still, you know.
Right. Oh, you live there pretty much. Good shows you get to set up the day before. Some shows which take place on streets, you have to show up at like 3-4 in the morning. And again, just real briefly, when you go do an art show as an artist, everything there but the ground you bring yourself. So if there's a booth, you bring the booth, any tables, any content in it, all of it you have to pack up and be able to get to the destination intact, by the way, and get it set up in a couple of hours. And then you have to look your best and interact with people for 10, 12 hours a day. Most shows that I go to are 3 days or 4 days. That's what I need to make it all work. And so at the very end of the last day, you have to tear it all out and be out of there in just a couple of hours. They push you real hard on that. So it's funny. You're the star of the show, and then you're the janitor at the end of it. So
Yes.
it's just all about getting the work done. And it's fun, though. It gets in your blood. It's a really unique way to do things. It's different than traditional retail. You see people at their best. My booth, especially, they come to screw around with paintbrushes and have fun and relax. I mean, it's just the best of all possible combinations. And there's no stress to it. I am not a pushy person by my nature. And I figured the brushes will present themselves. If they want the opportunity, they'll grab it. If not, there's a lot of other brushes out there. I realize I'm in competition with a lot of things. And but what people like about the brushes is the uniqueness and the performance of them, and the fact that I am about the only person that offers a lifetime warranty for a paintbrush. That's a pretty bold thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when I read and I wrote down the benefits of the brushes in the video's description, I saw the lifetime warranty, which I haven't noticed before, and I'm like, lifetime? Where are there any small letters? I wondered, and it's like, no, it's just that. I read it a few times. Yeah, it's amazing. And I think that every type of quality product will find its audience. So maybe someone who just got started will go for a cheaper brush, but once they kind of become familiar with it, they understand what they could do more and better, then they find you,
Right. Exactly. And I'm sorry to say, but I kind of wandered off the trail. Roughly a third of the customers, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, I'm not exactly sure, buy brushes again and again. And
repeat after a while.
So a very, very high repeat rate.
Yeah, that's great. We actually have a question in the
same
chat.
thing happens.
We'll go to that in just a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, let's see. So Catherine Reed says, for new person to watercolor, should we start with these or work our way up to them? Would worry I wouldn't do them justice in the maker of them. What's your take on that?
Well, there's two sides to it, and let me digress for a second. I was at one point in my life, I was going to be a college teacher, and so I'm really good at arguing both sides of something, and, just because I see it that way. So the thing about my brushes is that they will get rid of all the little problems and nuances that you all run into with less expensive brushes. There's a lot of really good brushes out there. I'm not going to be so arrogant to say that mine and mine alone can do what no others can do. Well, the truth is they kind of can, but you'll never appreciate that till you've worked with some other ones. So a good brush can get you places that a bad brush won't. A lot of brushes that are the less expensive ones, they don't hold liquid particularly well. They may flow really heavy at the start and really light at the end, and you have to go back to the well again and again. There's frustration, but you don't know it. I'm going to tell you a little story to make my point, and I'll try and keep it short because short is not my strong point.
It's okay.
So my wife Jen, she bought me a flute a long time ago. I mentioned earlier I love music, and I've got like a nearly photographic memory for it. Well, it's much easier to listen and whistle something back than it is to actually articulate an instrument. But I tried, and she got me a Combined Heart student flute. Maybe you can see it back there in the shadows a little bit. But I didn't know the difference. But the thing is, the flute was not well made, and so some of the pieces, the bottom keys in particular, were just impossible to play. And me not knowing a damn thing about it, I thought it was just something I was doing wrong with the embouchure or something like that. So it works out we've got a guy that's a flute repair person. I thought I had the most obscure job in the world, right? And this guy fixes flutes. And so I showed it to him, and he said, well, yeah, the bottom three keys don't even seal, so you're never going to be, and you literally had to like squeeze down on these things to get a note on it. And then the flute's not hard to play, but hard enough. So anyway, long story told briefly, he fixed the flute for me. I gained like 5 years experience in 3 months just because the damn thing worked properly. And this is the same thing with paintbrushes. You get a paintbrush and it does a lot of things badly, but you don't know it does a lot of things badly because you don't necessarily have a lot of point of reference. Mine don't do any of those things. So when in doubt, get either my brown synthetic blend or my brown synthetic or goat synthetic. You can't go wrong with them. They are fabulous brushes. So going back to the question with that long digression, for me life is a long digression. If you get good quality equipment that does what it's supposed to, a lot of things that you will, I don't know how to phrase this, a lot of things that get in the way of focusing on painting are simply not there. So, but you can also get any good top quality brush. They don't have to be mine. I'd like it if they're mine, of course, because nobody else makes what I do, but any good top quality brush will give you far better results than the $3 and $5 brushes that you get at, I won't name the places, but they're offered everywhere. And so quality comes through in everything. The same thing, reason you want to use quality paints and quality paper. The tools, again, they won't make you or break you, but they can make your life a lot easier. And so that's the answer to the question.
Yep.
If there was really an answer in there.
It's a great thing. Yeah, I'll add to that. I think every small thing that you can improve will help the final product. So some people I find really it's important for them that the color will be quality. Some people the paper. To me, one of the things that bugged me the most when I got started wasn't even the brush. I started with very simple brushes. The worst side of Princeton, I think the older ones weren't that good. The paper was the thing that really irked me when I got started. So I think you should maybe play around with some very simple stuff and see what bugs you the most and work on improving that. I will say that for sure, the more your materials work with you, the better, the easier it's going to be, the more fun it's going to be, the better it's going to be. I'm at the camp of like, paint is the least important sometimes, unless you're going to sell and then you obviously don't want it to fade. To me, paint is the least important as long as you're just, again, practicing, because you can find some cheap paints that do a really good job. With paper and brushes, it's a bit tricky. So yeah, that would be my take. Some people will find that the brush is really annoying to them if it's not good, and I get it, because it's the thing that connects you to the paper. It really is that thing that helps you to paint. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes all the difference. And there is no one answer for brushes either. That's the more complex part of it, is that personal preference comes in very, very quickly on that stuff, and it's just so nuanced. And there's the thing that I found is that my brushes, almost all my brushes, have really fine points on them, so you can do very fine detail work. But a lot of people are used to the paradigm that to do fine detail work, you have to use a really small brush. And I can argue that both ways. It's what you get used to. The problem with small brushes is they hold so little paint that you get like 2 or 3 strokes and you're going back and forth. And so the focus of painting is the paint. And you find that with things that don't work so well, you develop a whole new series of rituals that you have to do. Like you draw a line, go back to the water, draw a line, go back to the water. And it's really hard to make progress on that because you've got the thing drying on the one hand, you can't get the work done in a timely basis on another one, and you don't know any different, so you just stuck doing that over and over again.
You have to compensate.
And that's where my brushes come in. Yeah. And it all detracts from the end result. You learn it over time. I mean, you, Liron, as an amazingly talented person, could probably use a toothpick and still get about the same results, and it would take you longer. But it doesn't mean you're going to like it or as quick or as enjoyable to do it that way. And that's the distinction that comes in. So anyway, back to the brushes. You can get any good brush. Mine are as much of a statement about a care for quality and performance as they are brushes, but any of my brushes work great. Get one of my small Goten synthetic. It's $25. It's not nothing. I think it's $20 with a 20% discount, and you will be delighted by it. Nobody's ever come back and said, I really don't like these. I take that back. One person bought 5, one of my sets, and they returned 2 or 3 of them because they behaved in very similar manners. And rationally, I couldn't argue with it.
That makes sense.
But I want my customers to be happy, so I took them back and gave them a full refund for it. So I don't have a problem with that. And they kept all the ones that are the best ones of the set, so it shined through once again. And a lot of what I do, not a lot of it, but a percentage of what I do is the same kind of brush, but it may be stiffer or it might be softer, just because some people like it stiffer or softer. And the original design of my brushes was for people to try at the booth. Some of that is lost. I'm trying to find a way to fake that. I've got some really good ideas to demonstrate it if I get around to YouTube videos, but as you know, it takes a little bit more time to make one of these things or several of these things.
Is there a plan
that anybody ever has any idea?
Maybe to release one video here and there?
Say that again, please.
Do you have a plan to start?
Well, my plan is to try and get caught up enough so I can start to do other things.
Orders
and as long as I'm busy making, as long as I'm busy making brushes, I really don't have a problem. But I can see solving some technical problems just on the page, showing off the magic paper, showing off the characteristics of the brushes. I make some obscure brushes like my moose hair brushes. You really have to have an interest in brushes to want to get a moose hair brush. But if you do, you can do things with them that no other brush can do. They're very long and wiry. If you're a potter, historically, they're one of the best to get because they hold so much, and you can get like a hair fine line. Moose hair is so the whole family, moose, elk, deer, and some other variants that come in that, the hair is actually hollow at the back and it tapers to an ultrafine tip. They vary greatly for the hair type. You'd never know they were a family to look at the hair by itself, but they have physiological characteristics that are the same. Well, moose hair is the strongest of the bunch. Not surprising, it's a moose after all. And but if you were, I don't know how to describe this. People, by general techniques, if you were more steeped in doing Far Eastern calligraphy or pottery, you'd be more inclined to use a moose hair brush than if you were steeped in watercolor. Yet in fact, I'll tell you what I'll send you on. And if you start working with them, you'll find that there are things that they can do that absolutely nothing else can do as well. And so as far as being able to do a technique efficiently, which is a huge thing when you're doing anything, they stand out. Well, this is not asking people to run out and start buying moose hair brushes. I'm just saying it's one of the most obscure things that I work with. And unless you're in a booth, you'd never have an opportunity realistically to try one of these things. And in a show, I'll sell like maybe 40 of them. No, not maybe 40 of them, maybe 4 of them compared to like maybe 40 of my small goat synthetic brush, just because the goat synthetic is way more appealing, really. But there are a percentage of people that like what they do. And with some of my more, I call them rarefied brushes, they fall into that category. And there's just no easy way to duplicate that online.
You give people options. That's one thing that's really important.
Right. And that's why I offer over 200 different brushes. So
yeah,
it continues to spiral on me. And I try to...
We have we have a question from Robin. Will it hurt the brush to use the acrylic paint? And I'm going to join the question and ask actually about India ink or something like that.
Sure. Well, okay. So number one, it depends on the brush we're talking about. So let's first talk about cleaners in general and taking care of paintbrushes. I provide a document with my brushes that shows how to break in a brush and how to clean them. There's no magic to it. It's like all things, just a willingness to do the work. The thing about acrylics is that if you let them dry, they turn to concrete. They're very difficult to get out. You can get it out with solvents, and so solvents, most solvents are designed to break down protein. Hair is made largely out of protein. So if you use a natural hairbrush, you sacrifice a little bit of it every time you use a solvent cleaner. You won't ruin it overnight, but a brush that could last a lifetime may last 5 years if you use it with solvents. So that's the risk with that. With acrylics, of course, they're water-based. And I don't know if you know it, but acrylic paints are actually the same stuff that goes into wall paint. It's really a latex material. They have a million different compounds for it, a million different mixes. But the thing about acrylics, and one of the things I recommend, I'm going to grab one of my brushes. So you always want to dry the brush, where's the camera, with the bristle pointing downhill like that. So you want to wash it as thoroughly as you can. Use shampoo and water. You can use Dawn dishwashing soap and water. Wash it as thoroughly as you can. Let it soak for a while. Get some typing paper out. Scrub the surface with the typing paper lightly. If there's any pigment at all on it, wash it again. Once it comes out clean, always dry it with the bristle going downhill. It can be straight up and down. It can be just that much, but you want to make gravity your friend, and that way it will pull the particulates out. What destroys brushes is when you dry them like this, any particulates get pushed down into the base. The hairs are stacked together like that, but the particles are smaller, so they'll work their way down inside, and they gradually push the brushes apart, and that's what causes them to splay. That's what ruins brushes. So there's a document on my website on the About side, that's on the right side, that shows you how to clean brushes. So back to the question, will it hurt the brush to use acrylic paint? No, but if you clean it, if you don't clean it thoroughly, it will destroy the brush over time doing it that way. Maybe it's the same with anything. Acrylics.
For acrylics.
Right. Well, in synthetics, it'll have the same problem, but you can use harsher cleaners without the risk of damaging them as quickly. A synthetic bristle cared for will last about 20 years. It's the nature of plastic. It'll become brittle and fracture after a while. And you see the same thing in old cars. I have a bunch of old cars. I could tell you stories, but plastics just fall apart after about 20 years. And that you can't get around. Actually, arguably you can, but yet another conversation. You'd never want to do what it takes to make plastic last.
What do we say about India ink? Or just ink?
So India ink, the same thing. There's 2 types of inks for the sake of this conversation. Those which are water-based, those which are solvent-based. And so India ink is permanent by its nature. So you have to use, like, at the very least, like a paint thinner to get it off. Go ahead and use it. For natural hairbrushes, what you want to do is the weakest cleaner that will get rid of it. And then after that, on occasion, use hair conditioner. That's why I like shampoos, because shampoos really are the state of the science for hair care. They want to know how to clean, even a person that's, shall we say, an athlete, to approach this in a very slight way that perspires a lot, and they want to be able to get the hair clean without causing it to be damaged. And I mean, billions are spent on research because who doesn't use shampoo, right? And so it's the best possible thing for hair care. Well, the next step is if you're using natural hair brushes and you use solvent-based paints, you can use a conditioner on the natural hair brushes to put back a little bit of what the cleaners take out. And again, this is all covered in the document that I have, but the short version of it is wash the brush very thoroughly, rinse it even more thoroughly, and then be sure it goes out. If you use a conditioner on, put the conditioner on. After you've cleaned it, let it dry completely, again with the bristle down. The next time you use it, wash it very thoroughly in warm water to get all the conditioner out, because conditioner is slippery. That's how it gets, well, anyway, it's how it's how it works. But if you have that on the brush, if you have conditioner on the brush, it's not going to hold paint. You're going to wonder what is wrong with the brush. What did he tell me to do? Just wash it out in warm water and it'll be fine. On that point, if you feel the bristles of a brush and they're really clean, they're actually slightly grabby. You can feel it and your hands won't slide. With synthetics, every brush you get from as new is going to be dirty. That's why I recommend cleaning them. A lot of people use gum arabic or some other starch on them to force you to clean them, and nobody ever does a good job on it. It's like, okay, 5 seconds later, that's more than enough. And so the first things you get on it, you get some of the materials from the manufacturing process on it, yada, yada. Nobody cares, so it's not a big deal, but it really makes a difference to thoroughly clean the brushes. And going back to using acrylic paint or cleaning them, if you use things that are solvent based, put some hair conditioner on after, let it dry. The next time you use the brush, wash it off. It'll do about as good as possible at restoring the brush. But if you're using acrylics mostly, excuse me, I would lean you towards just using a good paint thinner every now and then with it, because that will get rid of the stuff that you're going to get, stuff that accumulates in the base unless you go to a greater extent than anybody else does. It's just kind of built into the process. But do that. You can also use nail polish removal.
Oh,
we do that again. Nail polish remover, which is more generally known as acetone. And but be very, very careful about the fumes. That stuff can kill you. But use it with even a small fan nearby, and it will be fine. I use acetone. So one of the steps that I do to make the brushes, one of the last steps is to put linseed oil on them. And literally I give them a bath. I have what looks like a noodle fryer. It's a big one. And I put all the brushes so that the tips are down. These are before they have brushes on them. So there's just openings, and I don't want the oil to get in the inside because that creates problems. And so then I pour linseed oil like a gallon at a time over the top of them, and it rinses them down. It's a technique that I found. It's a really quick way. I used to do it all by hand, and it would take me like 2 or 3 minutes per brush to do. And it's like I have to make 500 brushes today, and it would be like a 15-hour job. And now I do it in like 2 hours. So it still takes a day to dry. So you want to do the best you possibly can, but you find techniques to help you do that quicker. It's just the manufacturing process.
Tracy,
anyway,
you're a real
so
innovator,
with
I have to say.
it'll.
And I see
Well, you have to. Like I said, you get off the shelf.
If you'd make a brush of it for your own
My own body hair. Well, you wouldn't want mine in the first place. There's not a lot of it left, and the other stuff is a little bit on the curly side.
You have to keep it,
but anyway,
I
do. So there is a tradition in the Far Eastern and also the Mid-Eastern world where they would take a baby's first haircut and take the hair and turn it into a calligraphy brush. At the dawn of time, calligraphy was how you became literate, and those that did were the leaders of society, and those that don't, I could make a million jokes, but I'm not going to. Anyway, so what happened, I get calls probably every couple of months at least, and people want me to make a brush out of their baby's hair, and I do it periodically. So the direct answer is yes, a first haircut, you can do that, but human hair is obnoxious as a paintbrush because, so to make a good paintbrush, the material wants to stick to itself when it gets wet. It's called having an affinity for itself. Human hair doesn't do that really well. Our hair is designed to trap air inside of it, so when it gets wet, it'll stick together but pull itself apart to create like a webbing, and that webbing is what provides the insulation. And and also human hair doesn't form a point. And so the end result is that they make terrible brushes. Some are better because they're very fine diameter. That's another weird conversation that I stumbled across because of what I do, but different nationalities have different hair widths. I never knew this,
Mm.
and there's a lot of jokes that have been built into that over the years as I've learned. But generally speaking, redheads have the thinnest hair, and people from I don't mean to put this into national traits, but it boils down to that. But people from let's say Central Asia have the thickest hair, and they're different shapes. Also, like red hair is very very close to round, and hair from Central Asia tends to be more oval than anything else. And so anyway, but so that it follows that the best hair you would think would be the stuff that's red, but human hair doesn't have an affinity for itself. So no matter what you do, unless you're using really gooey, sticky stuff and it's not strong enough for that, it's just going to spring apart. So they're not the best. So that's the short answer. That's why I don't do short answers.
I can already see. I'm going to take a snippet of this interview, and I'm going to put the thumbnail big. Brushes from human hair? Question mark. It's going to get viral. So
it'll bring in a few people. And yeah, definitely. And
people who don't even paint, don't do watercolor.
Well, I make a couple of brushes. There's one in particular I make that is made from mountain goat hair. And it's got a 6-inch long bristle on it. It's a big mop is what it amounts to, that is completely unruly. But it is, what happens is if you just wet the tip of it and put color on it, it's like holding 50 small brushes at a time, and you get these weird patterns that they follow each other, but they don't follow each other.
They
it's like fractal approach to painting. So well, it doesn't really bunch that well. I mean, you can make it do that because it's mountain goat hair, and mountain goat behaves like other animal hairs where it bunches together. But generally speaking, it's just like having 1,000 or 100 small brushes in your hand at one time, and it's purely for effects. The other thing that it happens to work really well for is for tickling, because it's a very fine hair brush, and you can drag it across your skin anywhere, and it will give you goosebumps like in the first millisecond that it touches it. It's just there's no mass to it. It has no weight, but the nerves and everything being very responsive, you can tell if a breeze blows by. And so they're very good for both of those. So that's the one brush I offer that is, shall we say, multifunctional. Most of them are just designed for painting, but they all tickle very nicely because they are paint brushes, and it's kind of built into what they do. But that one mountain goat brush is the best at that. And so that's the reverse of human hairbrush, because human hairbrush doesn't even do a good tickle because it's too big to do that type of thing. So funny. Yeah, well, human hairbrushes from Lebenzon paintbrushes. Anyway, yeah, the ancient tradition, that's how people became literate, is their own hair to make brushes. It was the least expensive way to do it. It shows them quite literally, you are this brush, this is who you are, and you are a person that needs to become literate, because even in the 12th century, the 8th century, all of time, it made a difference to be able to articulate and work with language. That's if there's one thing that all humans do, it's work with language. I would argue that none of it makes much difference because of the myth of communication, but we all have that trait, and it's a big deal for all of us. So anyway, I'm ranting once again. I do that a lot.
No, it's really interesting. I actually study Japanese at the moment, and it really is true that different languages make you think differently. It's absolutely. You see the world differently. So when you translate Japanese to English, it sounds very awkward sometimes because the way they think, the culture is very different,
I know nothing about Japanese. I've seen the language, and it's so articulate. It's based on, it used to be pictograms, and it's evolved beyond that point. But, and then some of it's hard to do. And your natural language, what is your native language? Does everybody in Israel speak English now, or is it Hebrew? Or is it a mix of Hebrew and German? Or okay, so I learned that as a kid. I mean, I was like 3 and 4 years old when we did that, and I haven't gone back to it since then. But it's a very different language. As a kid, you just pick it up. We're like sponges when we're young, and but everything about it is different, and so you have to learn a lot. Again, it's very much like pictograms for the language. I can't speak knowledgeable about it because I haven't worked with it since I was just a young kid, and I hate to make up stuff. It's too easy to be wrong, but the same broader culture of the Mideast has affected the group there. And so I haven't looked at it directly, but I would guarantee you there are a lot of people that taught calligraphy 3-4 centuries ago and amongst the Jewish culture. As some of the oldest writing on earth goes back to the culture, and it wasn't for nothing that came about. It's a huge. I mean, could you imagine you paint but it's all nebulous. You know what these things mean, and you know how to convey things to people, but you don't use normal letters. And could you imagine? I mean, this is before computers, before all the things that modern culture considers normal. They were putting together languages where two people could describe something and they would actually have some common sense of what that was. And as I started to travel the United States, just like in 2019 was my first time I went to, like, I'm going to make up a number and we'll call it 20, 30 cities, something like that. The United States is a big place, but not that big as it goes. I've seen the Washington Monument and the Space Needle in the same day. That's pretty cool, but it's 3,000 miles. You can do it routinely now, but there are so many where I'm going with this is there's so many minor dialects and idioms that take place, even a couple 100 miles apart. I did a show in Georgia. I did a show in South Carolina. I did a show in Florida. I've done a show in Virginia. They all have slightly different accents. And these places are a few hundred miles apart from each other, You see that on the East Coast. And then because I'm from the West Coast, they all kind of hide it. Less so in Virginia, more so as you move further south. And then the West Coast, we're the opposite of that. We tried not to have the accent, but we end up sounding more like what I call Madam Google with this Midwest accent that just is more open and airy.
I love that.
Just the different flavor of it. Well, you see the same things, right? I mean, your neck of the woods is so concentrated for different languages and all these cultures that came from probably a common source, another conversation, but they diverged. And their biggest thing in life is not being
from so many different places, and even the same thing. Different cities have different dialects and different ways of pronunciation. It's really interesting. The word egg, you say beitza. I say beitza. Someone else will say betza, not beitza. And they're living really close, like an hour drive.
And you come to that same thing here, but every state is just slightly different. And it's just, I never do it until I started to travel amongst that. And it shows you get to see that because people are themselves. And I love it. I mean, I think it's just the coolest thing. And you learn so much from that. But to learn a language like Japanese is a huge leap because it's a different creature entirely. In college, I studied French for 5 years. You have to do like your undergraduate studies, then you have to do like the graduate record exam. What a nightmare. And honestly, what a pointless pursuit. But that's another conversation. What I did do is because I spent so long doing that, I also learned a little bit about Portuguese, a little bit about Italian, a little bit about Spanish, as well as a fair amount about French. I won't say a lot, but a fair amount about it. And I found that at the end of it, I was able to read a little bit from several different languages just from the primary study in French because they're all very similar. But Japanese, man, it's just like climbing a mountain that came out of nowhere. And I take my hat off to you. It's a huge discipline to do that type of thing.
I listen to a lot of anime shows. I love that Japanese kind of style. And I developed an ear for it. So I can actually now, if I watch things that are for kids or simpler, I can understand maybe 80% of it. I will understand it, of course, based on the visuals as well. If I would just listen, then half of it will go by and I won't understand. But I'm at a point where I can understand a lot of it. And you need to tackle it from different angles. You need to listen a lot. You need to practice talking. I'm doing private lessons too on Zoom, and you need to write. You need to do everything and really attack it from all angles. And sometimes I'm like you. I think, is it a useless pursuit because it takes up so much focus, and I have a lot of things to do.
Well, it's learning is a big thing. I'm a huge fan of education. Don't misunderstand that. The reason I said it was useless is I just never found a practical application for it. When you go to school, you learn a lot of things that.
I get it.
Right. Well, it's a sinkhole, and it's hard to learn a language. It's one of the hardest pursuits. But the irony is, it's like painting. As you get a toehold, then you learn this technique, you learn that technique. Yeah. Like in French and in the Romance languages, and probably all languages, the irregular verbs are the bare 3/4 of the time that you're studying it. You always build vocabulary, right? And you kind of figure out how to do that as soon as you get a sense as to what the letters look like. And fortunately, like the Romance languages largely use the same alphabet. But man, I couldn't imagine having to pursue it. It would just be such a big challenge. For me, the worst thing is that when you learn a language, you're put into being, and forgive me for saying this, I'm nothing if not obnoxiously candid, but you put into the genre of having to be an idiot because you don't know anything about this, and you're having to learn something while you're doing it, while somebody that knows a lot more about you is just throwing at you as fast as they can because it's normal for them. It's just the worst possible place for a person.
You turn into an idiot.
You don't have any privacy.
You have no personality. Right. You have no humor. Nothing.
And you can't make a joke. You can't do anything. And you just try and struggle to deal with it. And just like the phrase "je suis," by the time you learn, like, I am, he is, she is, they are, he is not, and all the conjugations. and it's just, I mean, it's not the same in every language, but it's the same because that's what language is. The things that don't conjugate regularly.
This is really going down the rabbit hole, but they have, for example, they don't have, the conjugations are very different, and they don't have the verb noun agreement, or I forgot how you call that. So basically, it's very different. But you have one, subject, you have one word for, let's say, even single and plural. It's the same. There is no. It's crazy, and maybe they have a small particle they add to the end that turns it into, in Hebrew, for example, objects have they're either male or female. That you actually treat them differently based on the verb conjugation, and I don't know. It's like there's nothing like that in English, but also not in Japanese. So
right, and French is very much like that too. Romance languages in general are in the same manner, and it's just a nightmare. It's a formal study.
They're the opposite. Everything has its own thing.
Teach yourself a language in 5 minutes. You can maybe learn where is Dalu, and beyond that, you're pretty much hopeless. What else do you need to know, right? But what I found, ironically, since I've interacted with people from everywhere, is that English has become the nation of or not the language, it's the language of the world, and it's funny. And then the other thing is, I just wanted to touch on how things are objectified. So like in the Romance languages, you wouldn't say, this smells good, because to them they would think, like, we're talking about a tube of toothpaste. Oh, the toothpaste smells good. Well, then logically they would think that the toothpaste is actually able to smell. And so what they would say is it has a good smell, and you objectify like that. And so you characterize the world based upon how you describe it, right? And then every language does its own way of doing that. There's general classifications, but they all fall back to humans. But the diversity as to how we objectify the world goes straight to how we perceive the world, and everything hangs on the end of that. So language
I have a great parallel to that. I have a great parallel in Japanese too. When they say the I understand, wakarimasu, or wakarimashita, it doesn't mean I understand. It means it breaks down to me, or it is understandable to me. And that's that. It doesn't. You don't do anything. The thing you're talking about is understandable to you. It's so strange.
And it's how Einstein said it. Sooner or later you work on a problem, and precisely it comes up and taps you on the shoulder and says, "Here is your solution. I am your solution." And it's the same thing. You have to really learn the nuances. And then, speaking for myself, for as much as I've got really good memorization skills, I'm an old fart now, and they just flat out disappears. It's one of the great horror shows of getting older. It's I still remember my name without having to worry about it too much, but it's one of those thresholds you cross every day going. So I figure if I can get out of bed and I remember my name, it's off to a good start. So beyond that, it's like working with brushes. So it's the brush making, just dropping back to that, has been just the coolest thing. I'm a knowledge junkie. I can't get around that. It's just who I am. And because as a kid, I was not so much, and I was intimidated, and yada, yada, all the things that happen in life that cause somebody to go a given direction. But I found I really enjoy learning. And as I'm old, you can't stop the process, of course, but I enjoy it as much. But there'll be a time that, like 3 days later, I'll have spent, like 3 days before, I'll have spent 2 or 3 hours working on something to try and help myself do something. And then it's like, what the hell was that? You can't even remember the block of time. And you get back there, then it all comes back to me at this point still. But it just sucks, It's the thing I hate most about getting older. And that keeping track of my fingers.
You're doing a great job, I think. So.
And 10 years, 10 years of school pays dividends that I wouldn't recommend anybody actually pursue. But if you like it, stay in school as long as you can. I work with a lot of students. The Amsika show, being designed around education, is all students, like 90%. And I always encourage anybody to stay in school as long as they possibly can. It's not necessarily the best thing, but if you can make it work, it is the best possible thing you can do for yourself. A college degree can open doors that you can't open easily any other ways. One of my buddies is a electrical engineer, and he works with people who have PhDs. He never got a PhD himself. He went to school only a small percentage of the time. This guy is brilliant. Electrical engineering is a whole pursuit unto itself. But because he didn't get the formal education part of it, he hurt himself over the path of the career, and he makes a good living. And he does everything right, but all those things would be amplified extremely. And when you're young, it's pretty easy to do. You just have to make a commitment, but it's also very easy to let life get in the way. And so to anybody out there who's in school still thinking about it, stay there till you get a graduate degree. If you can make it work any possible way till you get a PhD, you get to go places. You won't necessarily make more money, but you all but guarantee yourself a better life. So there are no guarantees in anything. But anyway, I'm a huge fan of that type of thing. I went through the system. I've been conditioned by it. And so naturally, I'm going to promote it. But it actually does work. Same thing that Liron does.
Very interesting.
Hey, you're an expert. You have years and years and years of practice.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And I'm a product of... Hey, I was a high school dropout too, so that adds quite a bit to it. And I found out later in life that the reason I didn't do well in school earlier in life is I was bored out of my mind, and the pace of things is very difficult. Yeah. And I like, as you can tell by the way I talk, I like things at a faster pace. I just like to bring it in. And in school, after a while, you learn how to teach yourself, and that's one of the best things you can do because you gain full autonomy and can direct people at others. Yeah. Well, you don't know, Liron, perhaps. I don't know your education background.
Yeah, so I never went to college or anything like that. I stopped high school. I didn't even do the parallel thing. We have SAT, psychometry, we call it. I never did that, but I will say, so to your point, first off, I'm happy that you said, because you are a businessman, so it's nice to get that take from you. I will say, if you know what you want to do and it doesn't require a degree, I'm all for going for it, especially if you're young and you have a lot of time and you can go for it for a while, see if it works out, try a lot of different things. But with that said, there are a lot of different avenues that you go through that you do need the degree, and it does help, even if it's just connections or meeting the right people. That I think can be very useful. It wasn't for me so far. Maybe I'll get a degree in the future, but I'm sure for many people it is the right thing to do. But many people are like you, and they will get bored out of their mind, and it will be too constraining, I guess, and they'll do a better job just being their own boss and just getting started with things,
Right, and in your case, you do a lot of things right. You took the initiative. Look at what you've done. You have like a worldwide following at this point.
Regardless. Yeah.
Right. You have to do that. And it helps to find something that you enjoy to get you down that path. But whatever gets you there, it's just vitally important to do that. At this point, your skill set puts you in the category of anybody with a PhD. You have a really good brain. And I've seen some of the interviews. What you told me about, none of us, on any given day, any of us are really good or not really good. It just depends on the moment. But if you look at what you do and what you've achieved, and you do interviews with other knuckleheads like myself, I've seen a few of them, and to be able to pull all that stuff up, you did it all on your own, and that's something to be very proud of, not to rest on your laurels. Human nature, it's a funny thing about the work that I do, but
I can't rest on my laurels. That's why I'm here, I guess.
Well, it's just, I can't either. I'm not built for that. If I don't have anything to do, I'll go find something. And
that thing you said about the PhD, I'm going to clip that and send it to my parents. You can be sure of that.
Good. Well, you have the skill set. There is no doubt. And look at your own work objectively if you can. That's not an easy thing to do, but you do an awful lot of things really, really well, and keep doing that. The thing you pick up from academics is how to find out things more quickly. You learn how to blunder more quickly. You're way past all that stuff. So I would not necessarily say college at this point would be good. Maybe, and I don't know you well enough to say this, so I'm not talking to you and saying anything with authority. I'm just saying it. But maybe learning some tricks for education might come in handy for you, for art education, that type of thing. But you've pretty much figured all that stuff out. I've seen enough of what you do to know.
I know what you mean, though. You're correct. There's a lot to learn from. I'm sure of it.
In your case, I would say not necessarily a lot. I would imagine you would be teaching classes after your first term in a college because you already know how to do all that stuff, and you do it really, really well. So, but education doesn't hurt anybody. And anyway,
if you pick up one or two small nuances, that's great. That can really get you to the next level.
Agreed. And nowadays, when I was going to school, there was no YouTube. There was no internet. Part of what got me work in the first place is I learned how to network computers, and it allowed people to save on resources. And so that became very popular. There was modems back in the day. And What's that on my ceiling? That's a paint job that needs to be done. I've been in this house
That's
for like
actually
30
my
years.
girlfriend.
And is it? Oh, hi, nice to meet you. It is there. As you go through life, you find out there are things that never get done, like that thing that ends in the closet or the floor 1 year, and like 15 years later, it's still there.
That's
And
paint
first
on
it's
my
a joke,
wall.
and then you forget
Will
about
never be clean.
That's what the ceiling is. So yeah, it's just what happens. We actually, another long kind of pointless story is right after I bought this place. I bought this in '93, and the city, in their infinite wisdom, decided to redesign the street. So they cut the ends of the street off and they put this really bad berm in, and then did basically puddling asphalt there. Well, as it turns out, there was a fracture on the street. This is Washington State. We were known for getting a lot of rain, and so literally there was rain that came in through the ceiling, and I had to call the city, and they got sandbags out. They were actually pretty good for Seattle. It's like one of the most indifferent cities. Yet another conversation. But they did a good job at helping me get past the crisis. And then not only did I have water leaking in here, but underneath the house, unknown to me because I just bought it, but there was, I think it's one of the storm drains that broke. So anyway, I looked underneath my house, the hot water tank stopped working, and underneath the house, there's 4 feet of water down there, and the hot water tank is like 3/4 buried. Oh God, I just about, it was, let's say it was very, very distressful. The fire department came out and they brought some pumps and they got the thing down. Well, I mean, it's not easy to do, but if you get enough water pressure, you can push a house right off the foundation. And me knowing nothing at the time, I mean, this is like maybe a 10-foot by 10-foot lake, which is a lot of water, but it's not going to do the foundation. And I didn't know that at the time. So, but they were just great about it. They brought a ladder truck out, and it was all the city's fault, right? This was 100% their doing. So they got behind solving the problem for me.
And they fixed the problems they caused.
Right. It's uncommon for Seattle. Seattle, they're notorious for billing us for water removal in our taxes and then using that money to do things like build stadiums that nobody asked for because roads were important, right? Anyway, I digress. I don't mean to go into politics. Forgive me for dropping out far into it. Anyhow, so that same storm that caused the roof to look the way it did, it also did some pretty nasty damage to the underside of the house. And I still to this day, I've replaced like, I think 4 water heaters over a span of 25 years or something. They're like $2,000 a piece now. I just replaced one last year for the same problem.
No.
So, but it's impossible. What I need to fix the problem ultimately is to get on the side of the house and get an excavator and find where the leak is coming in, number one. Number two, put in a drain on the downhill side of it, number two. But the only way to get a crane back there to dig the ditch is to use, let me do that again. The only way to get a excavator back there to dig the ditch is to bring a big crane in and bring the excavator over the top of the house because there's no access from the sides or the back. So that's why it hasn't been done in 30 years. And we go through like a new sump pump every couple of years just to try and not have to buy so many water heaters. Anyway, that's what the ceiling is. It's just a mess that never got cleaned up.
Luckily for us, that all of the things you described are our landowners' responsibilities. So the perks of renting,
yes,
I guess.
Very much so. Yeah, and I rented for many, many years all through school. I could never afford it, and even when I was younger, I moved around. My folks moved around a lot. I don't think I'd have to think too hard, but I went to, prior to going to college, that was the other reason I never did well in schools. I went to so many of them, probably in some cases more than one new school every couple of years. And it's really, really hard on a kid to do that type of thing, having gone
you
through
feel like it changed you or it shaped you in a way that led you to today?
Well, yes, absolutely. It's a whole conversation. I can't summarize it clearly, but not going to school when I was younger made me very attuned to education when I got older. And it made me very desirous of it. Had I gone straight through to one school all the way through, or 3 schools, it's commonplace. You have grade school, middle school, or junior high, and then high school. I would have been a very, very different person than I am now. But I didn't have that opportunity. My folks moved around a lot due to lack of money when you get right down to it. And so that had a huge impact. But the other part of it is that having moved around a lot when I was younger, I don't like moving. So we've been in this house forever, like 30 years, and I'm debating it because the housing market is so hot right now. It's a once in a lifetime cash cow, if you will. But I'm debating it back and forth because it's nice to not make changes. And it's a big deal. Like I said, you just would not believe how much stuff we have.
I hear about that a lot now.
Around, and it would be just
the market
said that.
going crazy and people want to sell. And
Yeah, it's doing the same thing in your neck of the woods. I'm guessing this is a global phenomenon because we're all stuck
The
in
prices
the
here
pandemic.
are much worse than you wouldn't imagine. The hope of actually purchasing an apartment, not even like a, I don't know what you call it. It's
Like a condo,
people
so they
aren't
call them
that,
here.
yeah, it's really expensive. So, for example, I have family in the U.S. and one of them purchased a house for, I think it was around 130,000. It is in a rural area, $130,000. That's a price point you will never hear of here. It will be at least 4 times more expensive anywhere, minimum.
Oh, that's brutal. Yeah, that's
It
out of
is
the reach of
maybe
mere mortals.
3. I'm trying to calculate real fast. Maybe 3 times at the minimum. 3 times for a small apartment. Let's say small apartment not in the center of the country. Yeah, it's not. It's a completely different story here.
You know, and the world is moving that way. I've been a lucky dog because I went into computer technology right out of college, and I was able to make a good
Great
living.
timing.
And I also, yeah, oh, it was perfect timing. It was the dawn of it wasn't quite the dawn of the PC world. That's when I started messing with computers, but it was the dawn of the networking world, and I was one of the members that were making it possible to do that. And I was able to make a good income. If it wasn't for the income, I wouldn't be a brush maker today.
Yeah.
By the same token, my cousin Keith, who did art education, well, you got to know teachers don't make a lot of money. And it was due to his brother, Lowell, that helped Keith get off the ground with the brushes. And Keith did something nobody had done before. He developed the idea of what's called, and I call it the same thing, a museum quality brush. And it's simply a colloquialism, if you will, or self-flattery, if you will, for very high quality, something that flat out doesn't exist anywhere else. And he started all of that. And I mean, the same problem that existed in the 70s when he started are there now. You have huge pressure on the part of both the consumers and the sellers of brushes to put as much downward pressure on that stuff as they can, cost pressure that is. And that's why brushes are so inexpensive, but the manufacturers have no choice. You can't put quality in a $2 brush. You just have nothing to work with. And so that's why you get brushes that you don't spend much for, and they probably spend more on the packaging for their brush, which I say ironically because most brushes aren't really packaged, than the content of it. And and you get what everybody works with. Mine are different creatures, both because they outperform and they actually last. So it's that trend has been around for a long time. The financial pressure, the same thing that makes houses outrageously expensive, I guess, or what makes my brushes outrageously expensive, because I got to pay a mortgage with them, and you can't get away from
it's maybe a weird kind of analog, but if I compare, for example, manga, the Japanese, and by the way, there are a few chat questions. We'll get to them in just a second. Loki, I see you. I was just going to say that the artists in Japan who make manga, it's just one artist working on the whole thing, writing the story, drawing the pictures, and then maybe they have assistants. But Western comics, it's more a conglomerate of a bunch of people. You have the penciler, you have the inker, you have the colorist. And I love manga much more than Western comics. And I think the fact that one person did it for the entirety of the process has a unique charm to it. And it's really the same thing when you think about it it's not the same, but because it's different, because there is factory manufacturing and then there's handcrafting. And I'm not saying Western comics are factory manufactured, but the fact that you do everything and you oversee the entire thing and it's your name on the line and you're a person, and you own the business, it's completely different. It makes everything work together in a way that maybe would not be the same for something that is more mass produced. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the ideal in mass production, the first ideal is to offer quality, and then you standardize the way of producing it. And so you can drive the cost down because you're doing a lot of standard stuff. That itself is a good thing. But what always follows on the heel of that is like, well, let's take the approach that we'll go with unnamed car manufacturers do, where you offer quality, but then you start making things a little thinner and a little thinner, and you want to find out where they break. And at a certain scale of production, you can make some things that will break and even kill some people, but the lawyers, the bean counters that actually calculate all these risks, they take it into account, and we're going to make $100 million off this car. We'll have to pay out maybe $20 million in lawsuits. So let's just save that extra. Yeah, let's shave that extra 1/16 of an inch off the door lock mechanism. And if it blows out, well, we saved a lot of money making it. Who cares what the result is? And that's what they do. It's called value engineering. And so you start with a great idea to standardize things, and then inevitably the goal of making money corrupts them. In my case, I can't do that because the product is what it is, and if I don't do a step, then it's obviously missing from that product. And same thing with your paintings. You could do it in 20% less time. Let me do that again. 20% less time if you did 20% less paint strokes, but it's not the same thing if that's the end result. And the suffering is obvious. And with well, if you do it engineer enough, you can get away with it, but you cut the quality of it. So if it's a product that has to be durable, you can make it look pretty, but be not so durable. And if you try to make it pretty and durable, well, that's why there are Chrysler, who makes very pretty cars, and there are Ferrari, who makes very pretty cars, and they both fall apart, but they're very, very different creatures. And so that's where that goes. In my end, what I've tried to do is to make a quality product in an area where there really isn't much by way of quality product. Okay, so I saw that. How long the real sable could be.
This one,
I don't have an answer for that.
We have also another one.
So let's. And.
Well, it's the same person.
Oh no, I would. So first, how long a sable can be? Well, I work with Russian sable is one of them, and I work with Kolinsky, and they're both sable, but the creatures are very different. I actually just had to make a major price change on my Russian sable because a lot of people are starting to ask me now for the longer Russian sable brushes. And I looked through what I have, I was able to find a bunch of tails. That's where the material for the Russian sable comes from. And some of the tails have hair up to about 2 inches. I need like a 1/4 inch to a half inch to actually have the thing go where it needs to go and stay there. And so I just made my 1.5 inch long Russian sables offensively expensive because I don't have that much of it, and that stuff is hard as hell to come across, and the likelihood of finding more is very, very slight. So I would have to, if you want to send me a note, I will be happy when I get a chance to measure, but 2.5 centimeters, about 1 inch, and I have seen some Kolinsky, to that question I'm seeing on the bottom of the screen here, that is longer than that, but it's not. What you see with a lot of Kolinsky is it's called red sable. That comes from the body. The good Kolinsky sable comes from the tail hairs. And they say that the females are the best ones. I have not been able to find out enough about that. I get pelts and sometimes coats, and I can't tell the sex of the animal from that. But I think the difference is probably slight. But I have seen some Kolinsky that is 2.5 or maybe a little smaller. It'll be right at the tip. I can get maybe 2 small brushes out of that area of it. And so, yes, as far as the length, it could be. But what you see in the stores, and I hate to do this, so forgive me, it's going to create a problem. But a lot of the stuff that's sold as Kolinsky in the stores is not really Kolinsky. It's the wrong color. It's the wrong hair density. One thing I have learned from putting my hands on a lot of paintbrushes and a lot of animal pelts is you get to know what the stuff looks like, and a lot of the stuff that's passed off is Kolinsky. I don't know what it is, but I assure you it is not Kolinsky. That's not to say all of it isn't, but a lot of it is not. You see a $15 Kolinsky brush, I assure you it's not a real Kolinsky. And, or if it is, it's got maybe 5 hairs in it.
Walk through a generic art store.
Well, I've learned a lot. When I first started into this path, I bought up all of the good brushes I could find and a lot of the bad brushes because I wanted to learn exactly what the manufacturing techniques were, and then also the functionality of them. What makes a good brush, what doesn't make a good brush. And the only way you can find that out is to put your hands on them and work with them. And anyway, and then so like that's the question for the length of them. I've seen it, but it's pretty rare to have something that's much over 1 inch long. And then okay, so I haven't worked with alpaca. Camel hair brushes, as you know, is probably one of the, I'm reading this question, have you tried making a brush with various camelids, such as alpaca and camels? Well, camel hair brush is the most widely known type of brush in the world, probably, but it isn't really camel hair. It could be anything. Most commonly, it's a goat hair. And camel hair is terrible. Camel hair is very wide diameter. It doesn't have an affinity for itself. The best hairs all come from cold climate animals, not warm climate animals, because warm climate animals, the hair is largely intended to trap air and moisture and create a suspension, and that's how it keeps the animal dry or warm or whatever the ultimate. I can't speak to that level of what things are actually intended for. Why do we have hair? I don't know. It sells hair care products. It actually serves some purpose. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just to make fake brushes. So anyway, so camel hair really isn't a good brush, number one. And number two, it isn't really camel hair. It's like that fortune cookie you get if it says that wasn't chicken you just ate. So that's a bad joke for it doesn't really apply, but you're not going to get good camel hair brushes. They're just not that great to begin with. My most popular brushes are my goat. Yeah, Pam is asking, what's my favorite go-to fiber in my most used brushes? The most popular is my goat and synthetic blend in all of its incarnations. I sell more of that than everything else combined. My next most popular are my synthetic blend brushes. Go figure. People like the feel of them, and they like the snap of them. And so those are the one. My personal favorite is the Siberian elk. I think those are by far the best performing. The silver fox is one of the funnest brushes to work with because it does everything so well. They are comparable. The Siberian elk and silver fox, they do the exact same things. They have about the same water retention and delivery. Siberian elk is springy, so it's easier to work with. Like Russian sable, excuse my bluntness, it's a bitch to work with. You have to be skilled to get what a Russian sable can do. Not everybody can do it. I can't do it. I don't like them because it takes too fine of a touch for me. But people like to move brushes laterally and make like these fan things. Russian sable does that like absolutely nothing else. But you have to have the motor control to do it. I don't. I would run to a silver fox for doing that type of work before a Russian sable, simply because I can't do it. I mean, some people, I'm sure you see them, you're probably one of them, but there are some people that can put their hand down and on the finest tip, they can find the exact tip. I mean, not even half a millimeter difference, and they can do it almost every time. People are variable. Nobody does it perfectly, but some people have that skill and they just intuitively can work that out. I am not one of those. I need something that provides response. And that's one of the reasons I came up with the idea that, everybody's got the same problem I do. And if you make a brush easier to work on the tip, then you have improved what the opportunity is. And that's part of what
I'm able to do it. I used to fill in full pages like that just to practice it as a skill. But I know a lot of people struggle with that, so it's actually a good idea to give them a leg up. You don't have to struggle too badly. I mean, people today, they paint digitally. They don't struggle for anything. Mixing, you don't have to mix. Right. You just open up the palette and choose the color. So there's no reason for us traditionalists to struggle more than necessary.
And it's a different kettle. In my photography, I did a lot of what's called post-processing. I would spend up to 200 hours with what started out as a really nice photograph. I'm good working with the camera. When I started in the world of art, it was as a teenager. I took formal photography lessons for 7 years. I was teaching classes towards the end of it. And then I completely walked away from it. And when I went to school later on, and then there's this fairly new thing called digital stitching. And you can do it with an iPhone now just by holding the phone. But it used to be it's an overly elaborate thing. And you get a special tripod, or at least a good tripod, and you do an image, move the camera, do an image, and then there's software that puts the pieces together and makes them larger and smaller. And you get a really good snapshots out of that. You can do what a surveillance camera does. And then I spend up to, not always, but up to like 200 hours to make the end result out of it. And my photos got into all the major art shows in the state. And so I must have been doing something right. And it was just, I've got a place called Justin Elk Artworks. It's JUSTAN, short for Just An Elk Artworks. And it shows a bunch of my stuff. I have the site's still there. I haven't sold anything in the last couple of years. I used to get calls from a couple of customers up to then. And just because I put so much into getting that, it was my first push into the world of art. And as you know, Mr. 100,000 plus viewers, it takes a huge effort to get success in the arts. Absolutely everything you do is created and pushed and invested in, and you do every scrap of feedback you can get for positive ends. That's what getting known in the arts is all about. And I was able to do it with that, and I was very proud of what I did. Plus, it's fun as hell, It solves all kinds of issues for me. I suffer from chronic depression, or at least I used to until I started to work in the arts regularly, and I found happiness just from the complete absorption of what you're doing and doing that. And I haven't really dealt with depression for several years. So depression is a topic that touches almost everybody. And I have found just like the best escape possible is being creative. Who knew, It's like what people are born to do is make things and have fun and deal with their lives. Or like the U.S. Constitution is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Well, I don't know if anybody's ever successfully gone to court saying that they're not allowed to pursue their happiness. You have to create it for yourself, is what I'm groping to say with this. And pursuing the arts is a great way to get lost, and it gets rid of all kinds of problems.
That is so true.
Obviously, it didn't work out that well for Van Gogh, but there's a bell curve to everything. And anyway, yet another
There's
digression.
also, I think a range of creation. I remember one time I was at this place and we were cleaning an area, and I had a bunch of brooms. And I found out that when you drop each and every one of them, because of their different lengths or whatever, they make a different note. So I started playing with the brooms by dropping them to the floor.
Oh, fun.
So
Sure.
it's a funny way of creation that we're probably meant to be doing whenever we feel like, to play around with what's around us.
If you this is what I'm saying. If you give yourself the opportunity and are willing to pursue it a little bit, it might lead to a dead end. It commonly does, but more often than not, at the very least, it's entertaining. It's a chance to try something, and if you try that long,
something will not be a dead end. Something will
come out of it eventually. Right? It's like the 2 + 2. It like I was going back to my cousin at the outset of the conversation. He held up a piece of bamboo. He stuffed some hair into it. He went, "You can make a brush doing that." And he built the next 20 years of his life essentially based upon that moment. And it was just messing around for him.
That's crazy.
And so
we have a question from John here.
Another one. Could Tracy show us one of the special? Sure. Do you mind if I walk away from the screen for a few seconds?
No worries.
It's just in the next room.
Of course.
I'll be right back. Pardon me.
I'll keep everyone entertained. So thank you so much for the questions, everyone. We're gonna give Tracy a few seconds. And sorry that I'm slow to address your questions. I know that I want to make sure that we get the most information out of him. I will use this opportunity to remind you to check out the brushes on the website. Use the coupon code Liron, you'll get a 20% off. And if you can, also drop a like if you still haven't. It really helps the stream reach more people. And I really, really appreciate it. Let me look at some of the things you're saying in the meantime. Quick hello from work, says Laura. Thank you so much. Pam, come back to Atlanta, Georgia. I'll start saving money to get more brushes. Yeah, it's great. So I didn't know how many people will be deeply familiar with Tracy's work. So it's really cool to see that a lot of you are. What else did I miss? Hey, Scars, how are you? Oh, you're back. Good.
Okay, so sorry about that.
It's okay. Yeah, everyone's here.
Okay. All right, terrific. Thanks so much for being patient. So let me find the camera. So this is the Rhizome handle. So this is
nice. Yeah, I saw that one. I remember.
So let me find the camera again. There we go. So this is obviously got a bristle in it. And so the bamboo cane actually grows out of here. And I should have grabbed a wangi handle while I was there. I didn't. So, but the wangi handles, the material grows out of, where is it? There. So that's the way that bamboo works. So this is actually the root ball at the base of the bamboo. It is very comfortable. You can hold it like, let me find the camera again. There we go. It's actually the camera set up for right-handed people. You can hold it like this. 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 Whatever way is comfortable. And the point being is that if you have a minor tremor, yeah, essentially it's a little bit smaller. But if you have a tremor, or if you have a problem with your fingers or your hand or your wrist, this allows you to get around those rules. The most popular are people with what I call cranky hands or minor hand problems, and also potters, because a lot of potters cane under lids and things, and this allows you to get there without it being a real problem. And so this is one incarnation. This is made, it's called bamboo rhizome, and it's actually the root ball of the rhizome. This is similar that I started to create out of hardwoods. It's really hard to get the rhizome. Again, it comes from Jakarta, and the guy that gets these for me is kind of angry. I pay him real well for them, but they have to dig these things up carefully.
You told me.
Well, they have to dig them up, and then I ordered a batch of these things, the rhizome ones. I ordered a batch of like 300 of them, and they made it to customs, and then the guy that made them wasn't aware, or I don't know the details, but he didn't clean them properly enough for customs. And by clean, I mean just some dirt debris on them. These things come out of the ground, and then there was communication
they didn't pass it?
No, they don't pass it. They threw the things away, and so like a batch of 300 of these things were thrown in the trash due to a lack of communications. So I started to make hardwood variants of the same thing, And these are a little bit heavier than the Rhizome because it's a different material. And I have a few variations of these, which are made out of like burl woods and this one's fiddleback maple, and just really taking the beauty of it. They're fairly small, so they're light. These things are about, let me see if I can get both of them on the camera. They're about the Rhizome ones. This one is about half the weight of the hardwood one, even though the Rhizome is bigger. So they're very comfortable to work with.
I think. Maybe 4 or 5 inches, something like that.
Let me find out. Overall length, I don't know if I can hold this up to the camera and then hold it that way, but let me turn the light around for just a second. So end to end is about 7 centimeters, not counting the bend on this. Here's the camera again. So from here to here is about 7 centimeters. And so this is the same. It's designed, I aim them. A lot of my customers are women, so I design these a little bit on the smaller side, and they're very comfortable in a smaller hand. I use Jan's to measure which ones work well, and that's one of the basics of that. And then another brush I wanted to show you, since I had the opportunity, this is called green onion bamboo. This is the rarest of the rare of what I offer. And so green onion bamboo, as you know, grows so fast, it's scary. This is the extreme other end of it. It takes 7 years for the stalks to mature, and as a result, nobody grows it because everybody likes how fast bamboo grows, and so it's really hard to find this stuff. And I make some brushes out of them. These are my highest of high-end brushes currently, just because of the rarity of the material. But it's the same overall kind of bulbous design where it's really comfortable to work with. They weigh nothing, and I put my best bristles on them. And so these are, I don't know if I even have these on the website. They're just so rare. I found a supply of them. I have to make a trip to Oregon, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours just to get there. And then there's a nursery down there that has some. And but I've got to get it before next spring because they bring them in and then they sell most of them every year.
I'll probably get one of those and one of the potatoes. That's really cool. I need to have one.
We'll definitely we'll line you up for both of them. And so those are very nice. So my works are designed in the broader sense of it. I'm an artist that makes paintbrushes, and I qualify my brushes as very functional works of art. And the one-of-a-kind nature is what pushes that.
They definitely are.
And some of the brushes are just pure art. They're expressions of style, and they're offensively expensive, and I'm the only person on the planet that makes them. And thanks to people like you, I have some street credibility now. So that's pretty good. And so I'm able to sell those in a smaller amount, and more people like the standard stuff, So
yeah, of course. There's going to be a bell curve of the things that are most popular and they move the most, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows I bring those, and there's always a small percentage of people that are collectors that buy my brushes as well, and they like the higher end stuff. But I understand for practical purposes, the meat and potatoes, if you will, are things that are 99% functional. And because I work with bamboo and because I put a lot of work into everything, they still hit the same marks overall, but they're not as rare or as unique as like the green onion is or the Rhizome handles are. And those are priced due in part to the rarity and the amount of work it takes to make that stuff. So everybody sees the product as the art world is unique. The art tutorial world is the most unique because your product is the process. Well, the funny thing is that you go to stores all over the world and nobody gives a thought to how something was made or put together or what it is. They see the end product. And then the beauty of working with artists is that artists are so attuned to what the process is because it's hard and it takes effort. And no matter how good you get, there's always something else that has to be involved in making that go. It's a never-ending learning curve. And so artists are uniquely sensitive to what you get when you put extra effort into things. And if I was selling paintbrushes for people that painted houses or things like that, nobody in the world is going to want a high-quality paintbrush for painting a wall,
just
right?
Utility.
But it doesn't. Right, exactly. And so that still exists with art paints because the marketplace has created that. But there are people that understand and appreciate unlike a good quality product. And those are my customers, and certainly they are your customers as well, because if you don't learn how to do something well, you're never going to get there. And well, you can, but as I like to say, spending 5 minutes with somebody who knows what they're doing is better than spending 5 weeks trying to figure out that stuff yourself. And
this is what I always say. To learn something, you have to both put in the work and also get the best information you can, because it does make a difference. So if you can learn from a person who knows what they're doing, it just sets you up better. And then you have to, of course, the hard part is to put the effort yourself. But I think that's a major part of it.
Yeah, it comes out of passion one way or another. If you're given to doing that, you will succeed. If you want to transform your life, try it. The worst thing you can do is try and fail, and then you try again. And certainly you get past failure if you're just willing to stick it out. And it doesn't matter where, you can get there. And if you can't, turn to somebody such as yourself that actually knows what you're doing. And 5 minutes of your time can solve any one technical problem somebody's going to come across, or maybe more than that. I shouldn't say that categorically. But the point is, if you turn to people that know what they're doing, you're going to get way better results down the line. That's why you don't turn to your neighbor when you want to build a house. You go to an architect, and the neighbor may be an architect, and that's a win-win thing. But in that case, he sees it coming, and he'll go, "Oh, this guy wants me to do $25,000 worth of work for a couple of cases of beer." Sometimes they'll actually do it, so you never know. It's worth a try.
But it can be really nice too, but that's not the same.
At least at the outset. 3 months down, not so much.
Once they get to work, it's going to be different. So, Tracy, we're coming up on, we're over 2.5 hours. I think maybe it's
it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been
really,
probably
going to wind it down.
Yeah, I want to spare your voice too, because I know you probably, after the fair, the art show, it must be tiring.
I love that stuff. So it takes me a day or two to recover after a show. And this particular one I just did was I drove there. It's just like a couple hours. Well, it was actually a 3-hour marathon because of traffic on I-5. But that notwithstanding, it was my first show since the pandemic. So my art show muscles are not used to all the things I did. But a day to unpack everything and put it away. And then I get so far behind every time I go away. I get kind of punished for being away from home for a while. But it's part of the life cycle. Not by any person, just the information flows.
Things pile up. Yeah, whatever it is, it piles up and you have to start.
Our lives are very, very parallel that way. Absolutely.
We have a few nice comments. Daiji says, "I'm loving the discussion. Very enlightening. The brush cleaning and care is very helpful." Yeah, I learned that too, because I don't do enough of that for sure. Don says, "I've been lurking, but this is really interesting." Someone who actually knows his brushes and exposing all the fixable brushes. I know that wasn't your intention necessarily, but it's important. It's important for people to know. John also says, "That's great. Thank you, Tracy." So do you have, like, let's say, to wrap it up, is there something, let's say first you want to, something specific you want to promote, or something something you want to, you're excited about, or you plan on doing and you want to share with us?
Well, I've got more shows coming up. You can check them out on my webpage. I found out recently on the bad news part that I'm an extremely lucky dog, so don't take this as a conceit. And if it is, it's a good one. I was lucky enough to get juried into the Smithsonian show, and then they liked me enough when I was at the show that they invited me back. You still have to go through the jury process, but when the show organizers say, "Did you like being here?" it's a pretty good sign that they liked having you. And so I got juried back. Well, then we had this minor problem that we all share. And so they invited me back 2 years in a row, and then they just canceled the Smithsonian show this year, which was heartbreaking because it's a cool show. It's the coolest room in the United States to go into. It's like this 5-story building. I think it one time was a stable in the way they do things in DC. Anyway, it's just a huge, huge honor to get into the show once, and twice it's just astonishing. I never expected it once, let alone twice. Well, they just canceled it because of COVID, so I was kind of bummed by that one. But I told you a little bit of the story about doing the last show. I'm going to share it with the audience, and I'll do it real quick because we've been at this a long time. I apologize. But anyway, I had built the COVID shops, the Pfizer version. Did it a couple of months ago, and then my wife and I just went to our first art show post-pandemic. Well, it's not really post-pandemic, as you all know. And the show organizer said there were roughly 80,000 people that attended the show. I have no idea how they count that type of thing. It's a street show, but we'll just go with that. And I had a booth in the middle of the show, and I was exposed to virtually every one of the people that went by there. We had a test, both me and my wife, for a week after, and it both came back negative. Washington is really good for doing the jabs, as they're called, and so it just shows that stuff is actually working. And I think it's very important to share that because my artist buddies, we're all scared to death of this thing. Our job relies on being in the public, and we can't work if we can't do that. Well, nobody really wants to put themselves at risk of dying for going to do a show. Yeah. And the whole trade show industry, which arts is a small part of, at least the art show part, came to a complete standstill. It's just starting up on wobbly legs now. So, and with indoor shows starting to close again, it's very hurtful for those of us in the art world. And with my point is that the stuff actually works. I'm old. I was outside. We got tested, both myself and my wife, and the test came back negative a week after the show. And that to me says, hey, do the due diligence, but you'll be okay if you wear a mask and go and do shows. So I just wanted to share that because everybody in the world is scared to death over getting sick or possibly not unforeseeably dying from this thing. But the vaccines actually work. So, or at least the Pfizer one, that's the one we took. So that's one thing I wanted to share with everybody. It's very important. I'm delighted if you check out the brushes, of course. That's my self-interest in all of this. And but you don't have to buy my brushes. Just get good quality. Yeah, the quality makes all the difference in everything.
Whichever brush you get, as long as it's good quality, but make sure it's Tracy's.
Yeah, no problem with that.
I'll be the one to push.
Sell one brush to everybody. Okay. All right. Anyway, so that covers it. And how about yourself? If there's one superpower that you could have, what would that be?
Superpower. That has to be flying.
A common super. Even call it a mediocre.
It's so generic,
superpower.
But it has to be flying.
Flying would be fun. That's my favorite dreams. All involve flying. Well, not only my favorite dreams, but
I had a lot of these
favorite ones involve flying.
When I was a kid. A lot of these, but it was such a lame type of flying. I would jump and kind of float through the air. I wasn't imaginative.
Well, the floating is the fun. Did you ever do the teleportation dreams where you're one place and then all of a sudden you're a far, far different place? Those are like some of the coolest ones because in a dream, trying to figure out where you are is like a trick unto itself. And anyway, so it's one of the things I heard I can't think of her name. She was in the tech industry, and she always used to close by asking the people she interviewed what their favorite superpower would be. It's a really cool question, so I thought I would toss it out.
I used to like opening up.
Anyway, I want to thank you.
Color, but yeah.
And I don't have a favorite color. My signature tends to gravitate towards the oranges and the purples and the reds more, but it's just harmony with the palette. And that just happened to work out. But I don't really have a favorite color, although you could argue that green probably is one that comes back to a lot. But
I'm a big fan of warms, so yellows and reds and oranges are my blues end the fastest, but because I use them a lot. But yeah, for me it's warms.
Sure. Well, and that's the broader appeal of color theory. That's yet another conversation.
Yeah.
And so you can package a bunch of different things together. I'd
actually love to do this. Like, there's a lot of interesting things to talk about, so we can definitely do that again soon. Maybe expand upon something, and I'll definitely go over the chat. And if you want to do the same after the fact, and maybe we probably missed some things, then feel free to, of course, answer questions.
Oh, I'm sure. I've been keeping my eyes on the conversation. Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you how honored I am to have to have their time on this. We've been yakking back and forth for a long time, and to get a chance to actually meet you and talk with you is huge. I'm just so proud of what you've been able to do just as a person. And the YouTube world is so competitive that to be able to rise above that really, really speaks very highly of your skills and your talent. And I mean that in the best possible ways. You're like the most congenial guy you could ever hope to interact with. But you're so skillful. It's just delightful. So thank you. You make a lot of happiness for an awful lot of people.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. It is my honor and pleasure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the broadcast, but stay with me because we can wrap it up not live. So you don't have to do anything. Don't close any window. I do want to thank everyone who is here. Much appreciated. And again, if you can check out the brushes, and just if you have any questions, anything we forgot, you can leave them as a comment, and we'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much. We're going to end it now, and we'll continue to chat.
An honor. Thank you so much, everybody, and also especially yourself, Liron. Thank you.
Thank you.